Chapter 281. It seemed that it was right to let second young Master Hay prepare an escape route for her in advance. She did not want to see Beligaju looking at her as if she was a monster. She was not used to that at all. However, she would only leave after she had taken her revenge. Whose voice did that woman's voice belong to? And the martial chi on Hellion Jiao's body, she had to figure out what was going on. Hellion Vivian slowly clenched her hands. Hellion Nau's smiling face and her biological mother's face overlapped. At that moment, Hellion Vivian felt a wave of hatred. Hellion Guang Yarrow, the real murderer. Hellion Vivian took a deep breath and suppressed the surging emotions. She turned her face and her gaze fell on the ancient book in her robe. "What are you looking at?" A low voice sounded beside her ear. Hellion Vivian came back to her senses. "What?" Beligaju looked at her with his long eyes, as if he wanted to see through her thoughts. "You have been staring at your robe since just now. What is there?" "An ancient book." Hellion Vivian smiled and took out the thing. "I use it to cultivate my martial chi. Do you want to see it?" Bailey Jiaju glanced at her again and stood up. His tall and slender figure straightened his clothes. As before, his tone was graceful and cold, yet it made Wei's figure stagnate. He said, "Hellion Vivian, how many things are you hiding from me?" Beligaju left after saying this. The coldness that did not fade away made Hellion Vivian confused for a moment. "Woman." Yuan Ming said lazily, "Didn't you say that he is very smart? Then you still dare to play tricks in front of him." Hellion Vivian laughed. "The one playing tricks now is you. You obviously know about the military seal. Why didn't you tell me?" "Ah." Yuan Ming looked left and right. "I think that you are still too inexperienced to know the truth. Besides, didn't you forget? Your mother just wanted you to live well at that time." Hellion Vivian curved her thin lips. "Yuan Ming, you have to understand that I am your master. Whether this is suitable or not is not up to you, it is up to me." "All right," Yuan Ming shrugged. "The military seal is drawn in this ancient book, but how are you going to find the hidden army?" "I don't know where they are." Hellion Vivian opened the ancient book and her finger fell on the picture on the 4th page. "There is always a way to find them." If it was someone else, Hellion Vivian was not sure. But if it was a mercenary, she could probably figure's way. Moreover, they often cooperated and understood each other. After the martial chi competition, Elder Huan wrote her 2 letters in a row, asking if she wanted to join the battle spirit forces. In the past, she did not want to join, but now, Hellion Vivian put away the ancient book and her eyes lit up. "We will go back to the academy tomorrow." "Good, good." Yuan Ming was excited. "You haven't fought for so long that I am almost out of nutrition." Hellion Wei glanced at him indifferently and grabbed his ear. "Yuan Xiaoming, you'd better tell me the truth. Is there anything else you haven't told me?" "No, I am serious, except..." Yuan Ming looked up at the beam and said, "Except that you have to dual cultivate with the third prince once a month, I have told you everything." Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes. "Dual cultivate? This word better not mean what I think it means." Yuan Ming continued to look at the beam and did not speak. Hellion Wei's gaze was cold as she looked at him. She looked like she was considering which ear would taste better if she plucked it off. Yuan Ming smiled devilishly. "What do you think the devil cultivator is? You have to pay a price. Every month. How long does it mean?" Hellion Vivian calmed down and thought about the problem. Yuan Ming's eyes flashed with a trace of appreciation. "Don't worry, it won't be long, just 3 months. It doesn't conflict with your plan. According to the way you've been sleeping, the next time will be around these 2 days. Well, when the time comes, you watch me, tie me up and throw me into the pool." Hellion Vivian said without changing her expression. Yuan Ming frowned. "Woman, do you want to kill yourself? Besides, dual cultivation is also good for the third prince, and the outbreak of the devil cultivator is much more powerful than the drug you took at that time. Do you think you can survive? Add ice to the pool." Hellion Vivian dropped this sentence and began to pack her things. In her heart, she decided to train the resistance of this body. Starting from the weak drug, there will be some effect after a month. Yuan Ming looked at her and his smile deepened. He admitted that she was the most powerful owner he had ever seen. However, The outbreak of the devil cultivator was not so easy to get rid of. Just that. Why did he feel that there was another soul in her body when she had a headache just now? Yuan Ming lowered his eyes. This was not a good sign. The rain outside the window became heavier. In the heavy rain, Belagaju did not hold an umbrella, but not a single drop of rain fell on his body. In the vast white rain, only his long sleeves fluttered, his white robe slightly rolled up, and he walked without a trace of rain or dust. No one dared to approach, except for the faintly discernible Fire Cheline behind him. "Master," she said that relying on the ancient book to cultivate martial qi should be true. Fire Cheline endured and decided to speak. Belagaju absent-mindedly turned the black ring on his finger. "This king knows." "Then master." Fire Cheline opened its mouth. Belagaju interrupted him. "The thing I asked you to investigate, how is it going? The behavior of hunting spirit beasts has always been there, but these days, they are more rampant." Fire Cheline raised its head and looked at the side of Belagaju's face. "They want to be immortal." Belagaju sneered and repeated these 4 words playfully. "Immortal? I don't know who gave them the idea." Fire Cheline lowered its eyes. "However, master, on the day of the wedding, when you summoned me, they have already noticed you. Your soul is still not complete. I am worried." "Then let them come." Belagaju curved his thin lips. With a soul-stirring demonic nature, it just so happens that this king's hands are itchy recently. I really want to teach someone a lesson, especially the one surnamed Tang. Fire Cheline answered yes and silently thought in its heart, it was really because of the desire to monopolize. The next day, early in the morning, they went back to the academy. Hellion Vivian just opened the curtain of the carriage. Belagaju had already changed into the green and white robes of the academy. He lazily supported the side of his face and reclined on the soft couch in the carriage, with an ancient book in his hand that he was going to study recently. Hellion Vivian just remembered that she did not read any of the books assigned by the headmaster. But it did not matter, she believed that the royal must have read them. With the aura of a top student, it was unreasonable not to read them. Thinking of this, she turned her head and saw Belagaju staring straight at her. Chapter 282. Hellion Vivian blinked her eyes in confusion. Belagaju raised his dark eyebrows slightly. The royal was upset again, but what was he upset about? Hellion Vivian couldn't figure it out, so she blinked again. "You have read the books that the headmaster of the academy gave you, right? Let me have a look." Belagaju slowly put down the ancient scroll in his hand. "Why should I let you have a look? Aren't we deskmates?" "Of course, deskmates should help each other." Hellion Vivian smiled gently. What she said was very reasonable. Bailey Jiaoju did not pay any attention to her. His expression was extremely cold. Hellion Vivian decided to do it herself. She wanted to get the stack of ancient scrolls that Belagaju had brought with him. Unexpectedly, Belagaju suddenly turned around and pushed her into the corner of the carriage. Then he reached out his hands to hold the window. In this way, Hellion Vivian was trapped in his arms. Hellion Vivian had no choice but to press her back against the carriage to avoid his breath. Belagaju lowered his head slightly and looked into Hellion Vivian's eyes. Only then did Hellion Wei realize that Bailey Jiaoju was actually excessively evil. Why didn't she notice it before? Shouldn't you admit your mistake first, and then discuss the problem of deskmates helping each other, Belagaju turned his face sideways. His thin lips were unbelievably beautiful. At such a close distance, he almost kissed her. Hellion Vivian didn't shrink back. She really admitted her mistake and said sincerely, "I was wrong. Can I copy your ancient scrolls now?" Belagaju took a deep breath, loosened his hand, and completely ignored her. Hellion Vivian smiled evilly. She opened the ancient scrolls one by one and began to look for the one that the headmaster of the academy gave her. But after a long time, however, the person lying on the soft couch casually waved his left hand. At first, Hellion Vivian thought that it would take a lot of effort to get it. She didn't expect the royal family to be so generous this time. Hellion Wei smiled faintly as she opened the ancient scroll. It was completely blank. "Where's the mark you made?" Hellion Vivian frowned. Why did this ancient scroll look even newer than the one she had? Bellegaju's expression was indifferent as he closed his eyes. When did I say that I would make a mark? It means. Hellion Vivian paused. You haven't read the books assigned by the headmaster of academy. Bellegaju picked up a teacup and played with it in his hand. With a faint smile, he said, I'm not interested in reading the books I read when I was 5. How could he know so many traditional Chinese characters at the age of 5? As expected, His Highness couldn't be looked at with normal eyes. Hellion Wei looked at the ancient scroll that was filled with words and felt that she, the underachiever, had been deeply insulted. How did His Highness grow up? Could it be that he was like young Master Tang, who belonged to the special group of people who could finish in 2 or 3 moves while others spent half a day to study? So why did such a creature as a straight-A student exist in the world? Hellion Vivian was a little sad for a while and then said, Since you've read it, you should know what the key points are, right? Tell me, and I'll draw them. Tell you? Bellegaju glanced sideways and seemed to think of something. He suddenly smiled, Okay, but I want to get something in return. Before Hellion Vivian could ask what he wanted, she was pulled over by him and pressed into his arms. Then he bent his enviable long legs and pointed at the ancient scroll indifferently. His fingers were as slender as jade. Here, draw it. This kind of position. Hellion Wei got used to the elegant smell behind her ear. Then, she picked up the brush and started to mark the place that Bailey Jiaoju pointed out to her. He didn't make any extra movements. He just held an ivory porcelain cup in one hand and pointed at the ancient scroll from time to time with the other. In the end, Hellion Vivian got used to it. She yawned lazily and forgot that she was sitting in the man's arms. She only thought about the feeling of not copying summer homework for many years, and her balls hurt again. In the end, Bellegaju seemed to be unable to bear it anymore. He reached out, held the brush in her hand, and wrote a few words on it. Hellion Vivian was still comforting herself. I think my handwriting is very good, but it's not the same style as yours. Hearing her words, Bellegaju seemed to be in a good mood. The corners of his mouth raised playfully. He let go of her hand with a noble look and let her write by herself. Hellion Vivian was about to use all her energy to impress him. A slightly cold hand reached into her clothes. Hellion Vivian paused, and the brush in her hand slid in an irregular arc. So careless. Bailey Jiaoju raised his eyebrows, his thin lips pursed into a smile. Looking at such a bad-tempered person obediently curled up in his embrace, his eyes deepened by several degrees. Her soft and fluffy hair was brushed aside, revealing a slender and clean neck. Inexplicably, it made her look even more fragile, which made people want to fiercely invade her. Hellion Vivian jumped, narrowed her eyes, and tried to withdraw her hand from Bellegaju's hand. However, Bailey Jiaoju pretended to hold her right hand with one hand and dipped it in the ink. His other hand was misbehaving. Hellion Vivian bit her thin lips, but her breathing became uneven. It was very hot in the carriage. She was not dressed as neatly as Bellegaju. In order to cool down and be comfortable on the road, Hellion Vivian wore a large robe. The collar of the robe was not small, so after being rubbed by Bellegaju, 2 buttons were undone. When he lowered his head like this, her white softness jumped into Bellegaju's line of sight. Bellegaju's eyes suddenly darkened. His thin lips slightly opened as he began to attack. Hellion Wei only felt the side of her ear heat up. The strength of that hand kneading became stronger. An indescribable feeling of limp and numbness spread from her ear to her tailbone in a flash. The robe on her body was rubbed until it was unrecognizable. Everyone said that the royal family was pure of heart and few desires. That was simply nonsense. In her eyes, he was simply a wolf, and an evil wolf that had been vegetarian for more than 10 years. Hellion Wei only felt that her entire body was indescribably limp, numb and hot, yet she didn't know that the corners of her peach blossom eyes were suffused with pink, and her line of sight also seemed to be covered by a layer of light. Because of this, her originally relatively light-colored pupils became a bit blurred that she simply couldn't see. Bellegaju looked at her, and his lower body was so hot that it hurt. He directly put down the brush in his hand and pulled her into his embrace. Hellion Wei knew that her back had bumped into a chest. She wanted to avoid it, but her 4 limbs were restrained by him. Beneath her long legs was the fabric of the robe. Waves of hot air could be felt. She could even feel the breath of the other party entering her pores when he breathed. Chapter 283. Why are you looking at me? Look at the brush in your hand. How could he say such a thing at this time? Hellion Vivian bit her thin lips and sneered. She turned around and pressed him under her body. Initially, she wanted to teach Bailey Jiu a lesson. She swore that she didn't want to do anything to him. But the door of the carriage opened. Eunuch Sun and Qingzhon stood outside the carriage and looked at the scene in shock. Then they put down the curtain and said to themselves, I didn't expect the princess to be so fierce. Fierce? What does it mean? Hellion Vivian looked outside the carriage and then looked at the way she was pressing Belagaju. It seemed to be a little ambiguous. Wait. Eunuch Sun, come back. This is a misunderstanding. Hellion Vivian wanted to get up, but she saw the noble, handsome and holy man under her was looking at her with a smile. She could see the scheming in his eyes. Hellion Vivian immediately understood that this was all planned by His Highness. He knew that they were there, but he deliberately let her push him down. Your Highness, you are so thoughtful every day. Aren't you tired? Hellion Vivian was too lazy to argue with him. She lay down in that position. Belagaju was not afraid of her anyway. Bailey Jiu reached out and hugged her, his fingers running through her hair. He could not see her small face, but he knew that she was yawning. His voice was faint as he said, That's why I said, be obedient and keep your claws. Don't see people you shouldn't see. Otherwise, one day, I can't hold it in anymore and break your claws. You're the one who will feel the pain. Just because he bumped into her meeting with second young Master He, he took out everything to squeeze her. Didn't she just break the agreement once? He was so overbearing and still held a grudge. She also had to take risks to meet others. Did she really think that it was that easy? Of course, Hellion Wei would not be so stupid as to say the words in her heart and cause trouble for herself. She buried her head in his arms to make her posture look more normal. That's my hand, not my claws. Was she a dog? They even had claws and claws. Bailey Jiu declined to comment as he took one of her hands into his palm and played with it. Her palm was soft, but her nails were hard. If they were not claws, then what were they? When you arrive at the academy, come see me every day. We're desk mates. It's hard not to see each other, right? Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows in confusion. Belagaju slowly let go of her. I meant at night. You want me, as the princess consort, to meet a man from the same courtyard every night. Hellion Vivian glanced at him. Do you want me to be expelled from the academy, or do you want to divorce me right now? Belagaju tidied up his sleeves and said, with the shadow following you, no one will notice. Hellion Vivian thought for a moment. I still think it's inconvenient. Wasn't he afraid that his identity would be exposed? Up to you. Belagaju looked at her indifferently. It seems that meeting me is not as convenient as meeting the second young master of the He family. Hellion Vivian froze. That's why people say that people can't make mistakes. Once they do, they will be dwarfed everywhere. We're talking about business. Belagaju seemed to have finished tidying up. With a cold voice, he said, I called you to talk about business with you. Otherwise. He paused for a moment, then continued, what did you think it was? She thought, for someone like His Highness who didn't play by the rules. She must face him calmly. I also want to talk about business. What kind of business does Your Highness want to talk about? Hellion Vivian tightened her robe and looked at him with shrewd eyes. The tip of Bailey Jiu's cold tongue slowly spat out two words, military fire. Hellion Vivian's eyes lit up. Good. When she came to the Dragon War Empire, she always wanted to set up a military fire team. Because once this kind of thing was found out, the imperial family would definitely not forgive her. Now that she has the cooperation of the third prince, she can freely prepare. But if a prince sells military fire privately, won't it be considered a rebellion? The current situation is so chaotic, isn't he afraid? Belagaju's voice was indifferent. The imperial family needs this batch of military fire to suppress the forces of the four sides. So it was allowed by the retired emperor and the emperor. Hellion Vivian didn't need Belagaju to explain too clearly, she understood everything. This is really a good project, money is easy to get. When the time comes, tell me how many people you need. Belagaju paused for a moment, then pulled her over. Give me a pleasing name. Her. Hellion Vivian didn't react for a moment. What name? Belagaju lowered his eyes. The name of the military fire business. She gave it. She always had no interest in giving names. Hellion Vivian opened her mouth. Just as she was about to speak, she heard Eunuch Sun's voice come from outside the carriage. Your Highness, the sky is going to be dark. If we don't go up the mountain now, it will be too late. After he finished speaking, Eunuch Sun silently raised his head. He thought in his heart, the princess is so strong, will His Highness be able to handle it? Should he have the kitchen make some nourishing soup for His Highness to drink? Hellion Vivian met Eunuch Sun's gaze and knew what he was thinking. She wanted to explain a few words. Belagaju sent him away. Go and bring my horse over. Yes. Eunuch Sun's eyes were very bright. He knew that his master didn't want to reveal his identity, so he prepared an ugly black horse and let the two of them go up the mountain separately. Hellion Vivian continued to sit in the carriage. After all, everyone knew that the princess was going back to the academy, so the carriage must be there. As for the matter of His Highness getting into the carriage, no one knew except for them. Belagaju got off the carriage. For the rest of the journey, Qingzhon accompanied Hellion Vivian. She served Hellion Vivian as usual. She didn't say anything, but there was a subtle look in her eyes when she looked at Hellion Vivian. Hellion Vivian held her forehead. Girl, it's not what you think. I understand. Qingzhon thought for a while and put down the teapot that she was pouring tea for Hellion Vivian. She looked serious. His Highness is so handsome that it's easy for people to lose control. Hellion Vivian. Lose control? Lose control? So the princess must keep an eye on His Highness. Qingzhon lowered her eyes, hinting at something. Hellion Vivian raised her thin lips and smiled playfully, but she didn't take it to heart. I know. Don't worry about him. Let's talk about you. Which courtyard do you want to go to? Me. Qingzhon paused. She always thought that she was just a servant. Hellion Vivian answered lazily, You are His Highness Death Soldier. Your qualifications should be good. I think you can go to the fine courtyard, but you have to be tested. Hearing Hellion Vivian praising herself, Qingzhon was happy. Which courtyard is the princess in? The fine courtyard. Hellion Vivian coughed softly. I'm in the inferior courtyard. Qingzhon. How bad is the White Academy's poor student? But she won the martial qi competition. Qingzhon felt that she couldn't understand the princess in front of her. If what Heizhu said was true, and her sister came back, then the princess's situation, Qingzhon didn't continue to think about it. She only hoped that the princess could become stronger. In that case, there might be some chance of winning. Chapter 284. The curtain of night fell, Murong Manor. Chang Feng, your return to the academy this time is mainly to cover Miss Yun's identity, do you understand? The person who spoke was none other than Empress Murong. Murong Chang Feng's eyes flashed. Aunt, don't worry, I understand. That's good. Empress Murong smiled, her eyes carrying calculation. Right now, my son is still young, but that vile spawn's power is growing day by day. With this Miss Yun as a check, we can always cut off his left and right arms. Murong Chang Feng naturally knew who the vile spawn his aunt was talking about was, but he didn't pay much attention to this. Instead, he asked, Aunt, that Miss Yun has already entered the academy? Naturally, she has. Empress Murong's white hand picked up the teacup beside her, blew the tea leaves inside, and said, This woman is not simple. She reached the gold rank at such a young age. What's important is that she made a good armament. The people who came out from that vile spawn side are always different from others. In addition, that vile spawn treated her differently at that time. Her identity is said to be a servant girl, but in reality, she's better off than some of the young ladies in the capital. White Academy's test, to her, is not difficult at all. Murong Chang Feng heard this and muttered absent-mindedly, she also knows how to make armaments. What Hellion Vivian knows, she knows. Empress Murong smiled, the corners of her mouth carrying poison. Hellion Vivian doesn't know, she's also good at it. Putting her in White Academy is the most suitable. The people of the Hellion family always think that they are omnipotent, but in the end, they still lose everything. Changfeng, don't worry, Aunt knows that the girl of the Hellion family made you look bad. This time, Aunt will make her pay back everything. Murong Changfeng didn't speak, even somewhat distracted. But Empress Murong didn't notice, only thinking about the good news that she would hear soon, the corners of her mouth slowly curved up. The night wind became stronger, but at the top of the mountain, it was calm. There was a door lock in the academy, so when the sky turned dark, the road leading down the mountain would be closed. For so many years, the reason why White Academy was known as the most powerful academy was also because of its strict atmosphere. Even the time for the lanterns to be hung was regulated. When the students returned to the academy, a master would lead a group of teachers to maintain order. During the first half of the semester, Hellion Vivian did everything by herself. Now that she had Qing Zhon's help, her speed was much faster. The bathroom was still the same as before, but Hellion Wei, who was already familiar with the road, no longer lost her way. She remembered that before, it was because she couldn't distinguish between a man and a woman that she bumped into a certain highness who was taking a bath. But now that she thought about it, His Highness's figure was really good. That kind of beauty that was hard to ignore. She was afraid that there was no other person in the world who could compare to him. In the future, she could draw a painting for His Highness while he was sleeping and then sell it. She would definitely make a lot of money. Small capital and huge profits. Anyway, they were already married. She could learn from him in whatever she did, saying that she was adapting. After Hellion Vivian made up her mind, she took a change of robe and went into the bathroom in a good mood. She was very handsome when she took off her clothes. Probably because she was used to being a secret agent, her fingers twitched and the belt loosened slightly. The robe fell to the ground as she walked. The bamboo forest swayed. Hellion Vivian soaked herself in the hot spring pool. Thinking about the scene in her dream, her eyes darkened. She closed her eyes slightly and quickly searched in her mind for the possible person who could be that woman. When she finally opened her eyes were clear and bright. It was not because of anything else, but because Yuan Ming suddenly sent her a message through telepathy. Someone's here. Hellion Vivian reached out and wrapped a long towel around her body. She stepped out of the hot spring pool with her long white legs and stepped on the green stones barefoot. She waved her hand and the umbrella was slightly tilted, showing the temperament of a queen. Ah! The woman who walked in, as if she did not expect someone to be here, called out in a crisp voice. Then, she coughed lightly and said, "I'm sorry, I didn't know that someone was already bathing." Hellion Vivian looked at her and curved her thin lips. "It's okay." The woman raised her head. Her small face was the size of a palm and had a seductive smell. She had a pair of clear eyes, but because of the curved corners of her eyes, people couldn't help but want to take a few more glances. Her skin was very white, and her long black hair almost reached her calves. There was a kind of fragility in her ethereal appearance, as if she was a budding magnolia flower. Her entire body was untainted by the past, and she was the kind of woman that people would want to take into their arms and love. "Then I'll go out first. I'll wait for you to put on your clothes before coming in." The woman smiled and politely turned around. Hellion Vivian took the robe in her hand, turned it slightly, and put it on her body. Yuan Ming smiled wantonly. This girl looks really good, and her martial chi value is very high. The most important thing is that she looks very harmless. Look at her, and then look at you. Woman, do you think you should be gentler to me in the future? I'm treating you like this now, you're worried that I'm in love with you. If I'm gentler, you'll suspect that I want to give myself to you. Hellion Vivian casually took back her gaze. Yuan Ming snorted twice. You're jealous. When you see a girl who is gentler than you, you'll always be jealous. I understand this feeling. You even understand the feeling of a girl. Hellion Vivian's slender fingers tightened, fastened the robe, and smiled evilly. Yuan Ming, your next sentence, are you going to say that we're women? I've known you for so long, but I didn't know that you're actually a woman. Yuan Ming was choked by Hellion Vivian. His domineering face rarely blushed. Finally, he smiled again. In fact, you're prettier than her if you wipe the black thing off your face. Thank you, you only know how to look at the face. Helene Vivian pushed the door and went out. The girl was still outside. Her body looked relatively weak. Standing in the night, it was difficult to ignore. The girl saw Helene Vivian coming out and opened her palm. Is this yours? Helene Vivian glanced at the sandalwood bead in her palm. She took it from the palace. She originally wanted to tie a rope to wear around her neck. It was said that this thing could drive mosquitoes after wearing, so there were a lot of them in Belegaju's palace. Probably when she took off her clothes, she dropped it. Helene Vivian didn't care about it and smiled. Thank you. You're welcome. The girl's voice was soft. She looked up at Helene Vivian, but some things are better to look at carefully. If it's lost, it'll be difficult to get it back. Chapter 285. This girl is quite interesting. Yuan Ming's voice rang in her ears. Helene Vivian listened and did not have any special expression. She only curved her thin lips and said with a smile, "There are other things even if I throw it away." You are right, but some things can't be replaced. The girl paused and her eyes seemed to have dimmed a lot. Helene Vivian did not say anything more. She just put the sandalwood bead back to its original place. She said goodbye to the girl and disappeared into the vast night. Sister, you just let her go like that? Heiju walked out of the dense bamboo forest and said to the girl, "You don't know what she did to His Highness, making His Highness." The girl put away the clothes one by one and continued, "I know, it's just the beginning. I need to know more about her." Heiju, you are too impatient. A woman who can make him like her is not that simple. A person like her is not easy to deal with, but the more straightforward a person is, the easier it is for others to take action. Before I came back, I have heard a lot about her. She is very bold, but it is easy to offend people. Moreover, I have never shown my hostility to the enemy at the first meeting. The girl's tone faded as she said, "That is why I can defeat them every time." Heiju listened to the girl and laughed. "Sister, you have a way. However, you have seen the appearance of that woman. She is as black as a coal ball. How can a coal ball be compared to sister?" The girl smiled and said, "Let's go to the superior compound." Okay. Heiju followed behind the girl. She imagined what would happen to that ugly woman when His Highness saw her sister. She could not help but feel refreshed in her heart. Gradually, it began to drizzle on the mountain. The students who returned to the academy faded away from the excitement of the beginning of the school. After calming down, they lay on the wooden bed and fell into a deep sleep. At this time, Helene Vivian sat up and looked at Qingzhon, who was sleeping in the outer room. She walked out of the inferior compound quietly. After the break time, the White Academy was pitch black, especially when it was still raining. The patrolling guards were also a little lazy. This also made it even more convenient for Wei Wei's actions. She narrowed her phoenix-shaped eyes. Her figure beautifully leaped into a small path at the side. Just like that, she passed through the back of the imperial bodyguard, yet wasn't discovered. When they arrived at the agreed-upon corner of the trading courtyard, Helene Vivian opened the umbrella in her hand and smiled faintly. "Elder Huan, sneak attacking people behind their backs is an immoral action." "You brat." The old man forcefully made a turn in midair and lightly landed on the ground with the tip of his foot. He lightly coughed and said, "It's getting harder and harder to manipulate." Helene Vivian tossed the strawberries in her hand and stuffed one into her mouth. "I didn't join the battle spirit forces to be at your mercy. You." Before Huan Mingxiong could get angry, Helene Vivian stuffed a jar of green bamboo wine into his mouth with one hand. "It's from the Imperial Palace. I heard that you liked this in the past. I stole it from the Imperial kitchen when they weren't paying attention." After seeing the jar of wine, Huan Mingxiong's eyes lit up. His tone was still serious. "Look at you. You're already a princess, but you still have to steal a jar of wine. Brat, is it true that the rumors are true? That icy brat is not good to you." "Him?" Helene Vivian didn't know how to evaluate His Highness. She vaguely said, "He's okay." Huan Mingxiong's eyes widened. "Don't lie to me. If you're bullied, just tell me." No matter how bad I am, I can still say a few words in the imperial court. This was the second person who cared about her since she came to the ancient times. Hellion Vivian smiled and said, I know. Her heart was warm. Her grandfather and mother had passed away early. It could be said that her memories of familial love only stopped when she was 7 years old. After that, she entered the Tang sect. Since then, she had never been bullied. Instead, she bled a lot. Every time she went out on a mission, she didn't know if she could return alive. The Tang sect's training methods were very cruel. At that time, it was the only place that could take her in. It was like a flower blooming in the darkness. It was very suitable for these vicious and merciless villains. Therefore, Hellion Vivian was able to accept the royal family's methods. The reason was very simple. No matter how they looked, they were actually the same kind of people. Elder Huan, I've thought it over. I've decided to join your battle spirit forces. Hellion Vivian raised her eyes, her gaze burning. Huan Mingxiong was delighted. He said 3 good words in a row. Tomorrow, I'll go tell them that you're joining. Brat, how did you figure it out? Legend has it that the battle spirit forces are all secret operations of the Dragon War Empire. Hellion Vivian's eyes were indifferent. It's only to ensure that the common people can live and work in peace and not be influenced by any family. Joining this kind of battle force is quite interesting. Huan Mingxiong smiled and stroked his beard. Then you should prepare. Within 3 days, this old man will take you to participate in the battle spirit forces test. Don't worry, that test won't be difficult for you. This time, there are a lot of new people joining. Your superior compound will have 2 new students. Those 2 are both candidates for our battle spirit forces. 2 new students. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. She remembered that she had never seen that young girl in the bathroom before. Could it be that she was also a new student? It seemed that this white academy was becoming more and more interesting. The night's rain dispersed. The next day, a cool breeze blew gently. The temperature was pleasant. In the inferior compound, the sun poured down in torrents. The teacher hadn't arrived yet. Everyone was rushing to do their homework. Only Beligaju lazily sat in front of the table. He rested his chin on one hand. His hair was casually scattered. He was lazy but didn't lose his elegance. He was so good-looking that people couldn't take their eyes off him. However, they didn't dare to look at him closely. Hellion Vivian yawned and walked in. She sat next to him. She wore a black and white scholar's hat, which made the pair of phoenix eyes more distinct. Morning. After that, she didn't wait for Beligaju's response. She leaned on the wooden table and was ready to sleep. Bailey Jiaoju, who was at the side, saw her like this. His beautiful eyes floated up and down as he narrowed them. At this time, all the students were almost seated. Even Nangong Lai came late and sat in his seat. He glanced at the little attendant who sat with Hellion Vivian. His smiling eyes immediately sank. Qing Zhon also knew that he didn't want to see her. However, she really didn't expect that young Master Lai and His Highness were also assigned to the inferior compound. If she knew, she would have chosen another compound when she heard the princess's words. Then, she wouldn't have encountered such a situation. You're living a good life. A familiar voice slowly drifted into her ears. Chapter 286. Qing Zhon thought that the words were not meant for her. She raised her head and looked into Nangong Lai's eyes. She knew that the words were meant for her. She thought for a while and said, Princess Consort is good to me. Is that so? Nangong Lai sneered, so you don't plan to come back? Go back. Qing Zhon frowned. Didn't he want to see her the most? Hellion Vivian smiled lazily, of course not. Student, don't forget that Qing Zhon belongs to me now. Please sit down and don't disturb our class. Disturb your class? Nangong Lai's eyes turned cold, but his face was still evil. This is the first time I heard that Miss Hellion would be serious in class. Hellion Vivian did not say anything. She only put her hand on Qing Zhon's shoulder and smiled gently at Nangong Lai. Nangong Lai did not look at her. He still looked at the little servant. Seeing that she did not want to help him, he clenched his hands under the long sleeves. The smile at the corner of his mouth became wider. Do as you like. Go wherever you want. If you are bullied in the future, don't come back. Swoosh. Nangong Lai flipped the book in his hand very loudly. This made the official's daughter who came in with him bite her lips in fear. What happened? Nothing. Nangong Lai's lips curled into a smile, his voice carrying a sense of comfort. Did I scare you? The official's daughter looked at the little servant. A little. Sorry, continue reading. Nangong Lai was still Nangong Lai. But the official's daughter did not understand where the coldness came from. Qing Zhon did not say anything from the beginning to the end. She took out the brush that Hellion Vivian needed and arranged it dutifully. She was calm. Hellion Vivian looked at the two of them and said in a low voice, if you don't want to stay here to read these, you can go outside. It's okay. I always like to sleep in class. I don't need you to suffer here. Qing Zhon's fingers paused. She raised her head and said, I will follow Princess Consort. Then don't look like you're about to cry. Hellion Vivian stretched out her hand and rubbed her head. She smiled faintly. It's just a man. In this world, other things may be rare, but there are plenty of men. Especially in the White Academy, you should look around and tell me which one you like. Qing Zhon exclaimed, why should I tell the princess? Study it for a while, then quickly take it down. Hellion Vivian's voice was very soft, with a hint of laziness. I have a lot of underlings. I'll introduce you to them when the time comes. There are also a few who are not bad. Qing Zhon was speechless. Why does it sound like a female bandit is fighting for her husband? No matter how quiet the voices were, the prodigy priest could still hear the commotion. He clenched his fists even tighter. The best way to forget your previous relationship is to meet a new man. Hellion Vivian smiled. Qing Zhon, you have to start over. Start over. Qing Zhon paused and said, I'll go. When Nangong Lai heard the two words, he was stunned for a moment. Then, he sneered subconsciously. He seemed to want to say something, but he saw the headmaster walking in with a smile. The white robe made him look like a happy Maitreya Buddha. Quiet, be quiet. The headmaster raised his arm and said, there's a new student today. Everyone, let's welcome him. As soon as he finished speaking, a tall and slender man walked in. Almost at the moment when the man walked in, the surroundings seemed to have been cleared. It became especially quiet, so quiet that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. Hellion Vivian looked up and suddenly understood why everyone became so quiet. That man was too outstanding. He was more than outstanding. He could even be compared to Belagaju. He had been wearing an ivory-white coat all his life. His dark blue hair draped over his shoulders like a brocade. Above his collar was a jade-like face that could topple all living things. His star-like eyebrows were like snow that had just melted in the spring, forcibly suppressing the light in this room. There was a gentle and elegant smile on his face, as if he had walked out of an ancient painting. There was a faint smell of medicine on him, making people feel that they would sully him just by looking at him, but they could not help but want to get close to him. However, this face was familiar to Hellion Vivian. Although they did not see each other often, she had escaped a disaster when she was in his carriage. Even the martial cultivation on her body couldn't be separated from the other party. Hair. The Master Wushuang was a new student, and was even arranged to be in the inferior compound. The corners of Hellion Wei's mouth curled up. God, who is this? As expected, exclamations sounded one after another. The teacher looked around at the stunned students and used his hand to adjust his glasses. This student was admitted late because of his health. All right, now let the new student introduce himself. After the teacher finished speaking, he glanced at the man beside him. The man nodded slightly and slowly stepped forward. I am Jing Bai Shuang. The man's lips revealed a faint smile, and a low voice like flowing water flowed out. Jing Bai Shuang? It was just that these 5 words were like a stone thrown into still water, instantly causing great waves to rise. The originally quiet hall suddenly became a pot of porridge. Everyone was whispering to each other to pass on what they knew. In the capital's circle, they had never heard of the surname Jing. Could it be that he came from the same place? Then he was the same as the other 2 people in the inferior compound. As everyone thought about it, they couldn't help but set their eyes on Bailey Jiuju and Nangong Lai. Of the two people, one lazily held his chin, his face indifferent. His slender fingers contrasted sharply with the brown scroll in his hand. Under the light, he was incomparably handsome. The other one put his hand on the back of the chair, raised his eyebrows and looked at the man who called himself Jing Bai Shuang. Then, he raised his legs and blocked the man's way. That man seemed to have an extremely good temper, but his eyes were shining. He swept a glance at Nangong Lai and said, "Long time no see." After thinking about it, he still gave the opposite party a safer name, seventh young master. Nangong Lai was ranked seventh in the family. This was something that few people knew. When people heard this name, their eyes showed surprise. These two people know each other? Long time no see, Master Shuang. Nangong Lai withdrew his legs playfully. I didn't expect that you would also come to school. Young Master Wu Shuang smirked and coughed lightly. He seemed to be in a bad condition, but this did not weaken his aura at all. Instead, he was gentle and indifferent. Even the seventh young master can come, why can't I? Chapter 287. I'm just worried about your health. Nangong Lai's smile was devilish. There was not the slightest bit of worry in it. Instead, there was a strong sense of provocation. Hellion Vivian looked at this scene and said in a faint voice, "Classmate Shuang, I still have a seat here. You can sit here." Nangong Lai did not expect that she would speak up for Master Wu Shuang. He first looked at Hellion Vivian and frowned, then looked at Beligaju. Beligaju's face did not have any expression. After hearing Hellion Vivian's voice, he raised his beautiful eyes. Jing Wu Shuang's smile never stopped. "Thank you." This sentence was said to Hellion Vivian. Hellion Vivian curved her thin lips. "You're too polite. Courtesy demands reciprocity." He helped her once. She helped him once. She helped him once. Moreover, this was not much help. "I won't disturb you." Jing Wu Shuang first looked at the man on her left. Then, she met Hellion Vivian's gaze. The curve of her eyes was particularly gentle. Hellion Vivian smiled leisurely and replied, "No." Where the other person sat had nothing to do with her. She was mainly helping him out. After Master Wu Shuang sat down, he gently coughed twice and smiled at Hellion Vivian. It seemed to be able to melt all the wind, snow, rain, and dew. In this world, there was a kind of man, silently nourishing things. Just by sitting there, it would be a sight to behold. This kind of man was Jing Wu Shuang. Nangong Lai glanced at Bailey Jiuju again, implying that he was not going to intervene. Bailey Jiuju did not pay attention to him, but that pair of eyes had lost some of its original warmth. However, this did not affect his elegance. On the contrary, for some reason, this kind of elegance became even more enchanting. He reached out his hand and pointed his finger at Hellion Wei's scroll. "This part is wrong." Hellion Vivian didn't know why the topic changed to this, but she still subconsciously replied, "Didn't you ask me to draw this?" "What's wrong with that?" Beligaju faintly hummed in response. In this aspect, Hellion Wei simply didn't guard against a certain highness. Once she heard wrong, she moved her head closer. She completely didn't notice that the tacit understanding and intimacy that was revealed between her movements was seen by Jing Wu Shuang without leaving a trace in his eyes. Jing Wu Shuang narrowed her eyes and met Beligaju's gaze. Then, he was stunned. His gaze was so cold that there was no warmth in it. He was like an absolute superior, bringing with him a suffocating sense of oppression. How long had it been since he had seen such a gaze? This person, Jing Wu Shuang lowered her eyes. She seemed to be reading a book calmly, but in fact, she was thinking about something. The class wasn't peaceful at all. The discussions of the students were like wild weeds that grew wildly in their ears. They were all talking about this enigmatic new student, and there were many people who wanted to inquire about him. It was unknown if the inferior compound's luck was off the charts this year, but there were actually so many handsome men. It was just that the first two were like a god. He was handsome, but not easy to get close to. There were also people who wanted to send letters to Beligaju, but every time they saw his face, they would feel dizzy before they could even open their mouths. Moreover, It was very likely that this person would throw their letters to the side after receiving them. What's more, he would directly ignore them and slowly walk past them. As for the other one, he would always be surrounded by countless young girls. It was easy to get close to him, but there was no sense of security. The new one was different. His easygoing elegance made it hard for the teacher not to like him. In addition, he would occasionally cough lightly, making all the young girls feel tender affection for him. Therefore, when it was time to rest, 2 or 3 people with straightforward personalities would gather around and inquire about Jing Wushuang. Basically, Jing Wushuang would deflect all the questions with little effort. Helian Vivian listened at the side. She couldn't help but admire the youngest head of the family. Every sentence of his was just right, and he was extremely smart. Qing Zhon didn't know Jing Wushuang's background. She just looked at the performance of Helian Vivian and the others, and couldn't help but take a look at Jing Wushuang. Just this look made Nangong Lai's eyes even colder. He leaned his body and put his hand on Beligaju's shoulder. What is he doing here instead of staying in Armament City? Flirting with young girls? Your hand. Beligaju's eyes fell slowly, and his voice was still indifferent. You don't want it anymore? Nangong Lai's eyes evoked a dense evil aura. Ju, don't blame your brother for not reminding you. This guy most likely came for Wei Wei. Recently, Wei Zi World's momentum has been too great. As the young master of the Armaments Assembly, he'll certainly feel fear in his heart. But it's strange that Helian Vivian would speak up for him. Listening to her, these 2 people have interacted before. What does this mean? People in the same industry, sympathizing with each other? Sympathizing with each other? After hearing these 4 words, Beligaju's mouth showed a dazzling coldness. It was so cold that Nangong Lai swallowed all the words he was about to say. Meanwhile, the other students were still immersed in the newcomer. Oh right, have you heard? There is a new student from the superior compound. She looks like a fairy. I don't know which family she is from. She is young, but her martial chi value is very high. She lit up the whole crystal ball. Even the dean is full of praise for her. More importantly, she can make armaments, and she has a high-quality weapon on her. Is there really such a person? Where did she come from? I have never heard of such a person in the capital. I don't know either, but this news must be true. The teacher from the superior compound admitted it himself. The news about the new student was the talk of the town, but this was the most common thing for Helian Vivian. There were very few things that could arouse her interest. Plus, she was now focused on how to find the hidden army, so she did not pay attention to these things. However, what she cared about was that Yuan Ming said in her ear, "This girl is really interesting." When Helian Vivian looked up, she saw a young girl standing in the commercial courtyard that she often visited. She looked like she was choosing books. However, besides Helian Vivian, very few people came to this place. Logically speaking, it should not be convenient for Elder Huan to appear when there were other people around. However, today, he sat steadily in the courtyard with a cup of hot tea by his hand. Helian Vivian smiled and walked over. When the young girl saw Helian Vivian, she smiled lightly. What a coincidence. It is indeed a coincidence. When Helian Vivian was a person who was casual, no one could guess her emotions. The young girl tilted her head and looked at her for a while. She did not say anything and turned around to continue choosing her books. When she looked down, there was some coldness in her eyes. Chapter 288. Wei Wei also wasn't in a hurry to talk to Huan Mingxiong. She strolled over to the window side and lazily sat on a chair. She held a book in her hand. Even the way she flipped the pages of the book was calm and unhurried. The most important thing for those who wanted to do big things was to be able to keep their composure. However, someone like Helian Vivian was extremely rare. As expected, she wasn't simple. The young girl put down the book in her hand. She hid herself well in the light. Huan Mingxiong glanced at Helian Vivian with admiration and said, "Luan Yang, come out." This old man said that she is very good at keeping secrets. If there is a third person, she definitely won't come and greet this old man. Just as Huan Mingxiong finished speaking, a cyan figure flashed past and silently landed on the ground. The young girl walked over and greeted him, "Martial uncle." Luonyang raised his hand. His expression didn't reveal anything. Like Huan Mingxiong, he was the leader of the battle spirit forces. Every leader had their favorite person to join them. Without a doubt, this young girl was the person he was looking forward to. "It seems that I worried too much." Luonyang retracted his gaze from Hellion Vivian. "She does things more calmly than I expected." Huan Mingxiong stroked his long white beard and pointed out, "You will discover many more good points in the future." Luonyang didn't reply. Instead, he said indifferently, "I heard that she doesn't have martial qi yet." "Ha, woman, another person who looks down on you." Yuan Ming smiled evilly. Hellion Vivian indifferently yawned. Huan Mingxiong's eyes flashed and his tone turned cold. "But she won the martial qi competition in the capital. I think it's impossible that you don't know about it." "Elder Huan." Luonyang glanced at Huan Mingxiong. "I don't mean anything else. Since she is a student who passed, she definitely has her value. However, you also know that the battle spirit forces have always emphasized speed, infiltration, and concealment. She still has much to learn." When Hellion Vivian heard this, the corners of her mouth curved up. She never thought that there would be a day when someone would question her ability to infiltrate and conceal. She entered the Tang sect at the age of 7, and the first lesson she learned was personally taught by young Master Tang on how to hide her true self in front of others. "It seems that Your Excellency is very worried about me." Hellion Wei Wei stood up, her long legs took large strides, as if she was stepping on the spot, and slowly walked over. Luonyang glanced at her and said, "It's not that I'm worried. I just don't understand. Your Excellency is not my guide, so naturally you don't understand me." Hellion Vivian lazily lifted her eyelids. "It's just that the moment you came up, you picked on my faults. Isn't this a bit disrespectful to Elder Huan?" Luonyang choked on her words and his expression changed. He turned to Huan Mingxiong and said, "Elder Huan, I didn't mean that. It's just that the battle spirit forces have never accepted anyone without martial qi. I'm worried that when it comes to actual combat, she won't be able to keep up. Those who are selected will go through a period of training. During this period of time, if they are not qualified, they will be eliminated." Huan Mingxiong looked at Luonyang indifferently and said, "There's nothing to worry about. Just take care of the person you've chosen." After hearing this, Luonyang knew that he had gone overboard. Although he did not think highly of Hellion Vivian, at this point, he still wanted to see who would stay until the end. Perhaps wanting to change the current atmosphere, the girl suddenly spoke in a clear and pleasant voice, "I didn't expect that you would also join the battle spirit forces. Is this considered a kind of fate?" "Probably." Hellion Vivian's voice was lazy, and there was no emotion in it. This made the girl a bit confused. However, Luonyang frowned and asked, "You've met?" The girl smiled and explained, "Yes, we've met. Last night when I arrived at the academy, I met this girl. Seeing her here today, I'm somewhat surprised." As she spoke, the girl turned to Hellion Vivian and asked, "Yun Biluo, what about you?" "Hellion Vivian." Yun Biluo smiled politely. The girl narrowed her eyes. As a death servant, she had met many people. However, she had never met a girl like Hellion Vivian. However, it did not matter. She did not care what kind of person she was, because she knew that she would be the one to win in the end. Thinking of this, she curled her lips again. That kind of smile had the sweetness and freshness of a girl. Hellion Vivian looked at her and played with the armament parts in her hands. Yuan Ming, on the other hand, smiled evilly. Everything seemed so calm and tranquil. However, when An Ying received the news from He Zhu, his eyes were filled with shock. White Academy. Miss Yun was actually in White Academy? An Ying frowned and his body froze for a moment. Other than Eunuch's son, he was the only one who knew that His Highness was a student in White Academy. It was very peaceful at first. But now, Miss Yun was also here. This matter seemed to have become very troublesome, because the retired emperor had always disliked Miss Yun. At this time, Miss Yun's return was bound to cause His Highness to misjudge some things. He really did not understand why Miss Yun did not appear earlier or later. She only came to White Academy when His Highness had just gotten married. He understood what Heiju meant. She wanted him to tell His Highness about this matter. However, he did not think that now was a good time to speak. Only I know about this matter. And Ying looked at Heiju and said, don't spread it out. Heiju laughed. I know. The retired emperor has always disliked my sister, so he definitely does not want to see my sister come back. I used to think that my sister was gone, but I did not expect that she had gone somewhere else. That year, the retired emperor stopped His Highness from being with my sister. His Highness was sad for a long time because of this. Now that my sister is finally back, they can finally be together. Of course, I will not leak the news of my sister's return. There are many eyes and ears in White Academy. If the news reaches the retired emperor's ears, I will be the one who harmed my sister. What happened that year? And Ying paused and said, we don't know. The retired emperor may have his reasons for doing that. As for other things, Heiju, I will say it for the last time. Since His Highness has agreed to marry the princess, we, as servants, had better not talk too much. Servants? Heiju sneered. She had enough of these two words. Her sister had already promised her that if she became the third princess, she would definitely ask His Highness to leave a place for her in the palace. She envied her sister's talent and felt that only such a woman was worthy of His Highness, so she never dared to have any delusions. That ugly woman was just lucky to get the retired emperor's approval. Otherwise, His Highness would not have agreed to marry her. However, she did not say this to An Ying because the lesson last time was enough for her. She was now only waiting for An Ying to tell His Highness the news of her sister's return. She wanted to see what would happen to that ugly woman. Chapter 289. At night, the moonlight was beautiful, but it couldn't compare to the man in the white robe lying on the soft bed. Shadow stood aside, hesitating whether he should go in or not. Belagaju didn't look up from the scroll in his hand. What's the matter? Shadow lowered his eyes and swallowed all the words he wanted to say before changing his mind. Nothing, it's just that I thought it was late. Should I close the door? His Highness had never deliberately left the door open like today, as if he was waiting for someone. No need. Shadow lowered his eyes and said, yes. Belagaju casually looked at him. What were you talking about with Heiju? Shadow's body stiffened. We were talking about the things we found recently. Belagaju smiled, but it was cold without any warmth, only the unique momentum of a superior. So, who allowed you to continue to keep Heiju? A single yen made Shadow feel extremely cold. He rarely panicked. Your Highness, they are after all the death servants that follow you around. If it's just because of one sentence, you'll... A sentence. Belagaju stood up. His posture was lazy but extremely dangerous. Is it because I've been gentle for too long, even you have forgotten what the consequences of provoking me are? Shadow didn't dare to speak again. He knelt on the ground with a bang, his forehead full of cold sweat. Belagaju slowly glanced at him. You've been by my side for 10 years, I'll let it go this time, but next time, don't make me do it myself. Yes, sir. Shadow replied in a trembling voice. Belagaju turned the black jade ring on his finger. Also, even if Hellion Vivian is a prey, she is still my prey. There are so many people in the palace talking about it. Do you want to wait until I get angry? No. This is my dereliction of duty. Shadow's face was a little pale. I'll do it immediately. Belagaju said lightly. Don't make it too bloody, just cut off the tongue of whoever said anything. Cut off my tongue. Bai Mai's fingers trembled as she stood outside. For the first time, she felt an unprecedented fear. All these years, His Highness had always allowed them to do as they wished. Today, however, had never happened. She really did not expect that His Highness would stand up for Hellion Vivian like this. Could it really be because of the retired emperor? But who in the world could force His Highness to do something he was not willing to do? She had not seen His Highness get angry for many years. That person seemed to be standing at the peak of the clouds. His temperament was indifferent, like a god overlooking the mortal world. He rarely showed any mood swings. Was he preparing to bathe the palace in blood today? Bai Mai raised her head anxiously and met Shadow's gaze. She understood what was written in his eyes. Even if he had been with His Highness for a long time, he could forget about meddling in His Highness's affairs. She thought it was time to talk to He Zhu about this matter. Death warriors had their own way of communicating with each other. After receiving the mission, the first thing Bai Mai did was to meet with He Zhu. When He Zhu saw her, she was naturally pleasantly surprised. "Why did you come to the White Academy?" "You don't need to know why I came, He Zhu. No matter what you want to do now, you better stop." Bai Mai's expression was very serious. At this time, you should be carrying out the mission, not appearing so blatantly in the White Academy. He Zhu glanced at Bai Mai. "What's wrong with you? Why are you suddenly telling me this?" Bai Mai's voice was very low. "His Highness has already given the order. I'm afraid that everyone who talks about the princess behind her back will have their tongues cut off." Cut off? He Zhu was stunned and muttered to herself, Why did His Highness give such an order?" Bai Mai looked at her and sighed. "He Zhu, there are some things that you can't get. His Highness will not like you. Even if there is no Hellion Vivian, there will be someone else to be the princess." I don't understand what you are saying." He Zhu's gorgeous face changed, as if her whole body was covered with thorns. Bai Mai's eyes shone brightly. "You know, it's not up to us to decide whether Hellion Wei Wei is a good match for His Highness or not. Now, His Highness is going to make an example out of his subordinates for her. If you continue to be stubborn, sooner or later, it will be your turn." "Heh! You mean His Highness is going to kill me for a chess piece?" He Zhu seemed to have heard an incredible joke. She laughed softly. "Bai Mai, you are the one who doesn't understand. Why does His Highness want to marry that ugly woman? Is it because of the retired emperor? If His Highness really cares about Hellion Vivian, why would he protect her so obviously at the wedding? We know very well what kind of person His Highness is. In order to protect my sister, His Highness has never shown his feelings in front of others. He personally told us that as a man of sacrifice, the most important thing is to be patient. But as a king, he knows to hide what he likes, and push forward what he doesn't care. Don't you think Hellion Vivian is just a shield for His Highness?" Bai Mai frowned. "Yes, I admit what you said before, but His Highness doesn't need to make such a shield for himself. It's necessary, because..." He Zhu suddenly looked up, her eyes shining brightly. "Elder sister is still alive and has returned. With His Highness's intelligence, I'm afraid he already knew that elder sister is still alive. However, the situation is not stable yet. The four great families, Empress Murong, and even the retired emperor are watching him all the time. In order to ensure elder sister's safe return, it's best for him to marry a woman with no power and influence as the third princess consort. Hellion Wei Wei is the best choice." Bai Mai opened her mouth as if she couldn't believe it. You mean, my sister, she is still alive?" "Yes, she is now in White Academy." He Zhu looked at Bai Mai and smiled. "It's a pity that I can't enter the palace. Otherwise, I would be able to send a message. But it doesn't matter, I've already told An Ying. An Ying will definitely tell His Highness what I know." Bai Mai did not speak. She lowered her eyes, as if she was thinking. She was sure that the matter of His Highness coming to White Academy to be a student was not known to many people. If she did not have a mission today, she would not have known, but my sister is back. His Highness's recent abnormal behavior could be explained. Like what He Zhu said, according to His Highness's character, it was impossible for him to act like this. If it was to make my sister safer, it was necessary to sacrifice Hellion Vivian. Bai Mai lowered her eyes. "Does Qingzhon know about this?" "I didn't tell her." He Zhu sneered. "I don't know what that ugly woman said to her, making her willing to be a maid. Before His Highness gets the news about my sister's return, the fewer people know, the better." Chapter 290. Bai Mai frowned, "But this can't be kept a secret. We are in the same academy. Qingzhon will see sister sooner or later. You don't have to worry about this. Sister has grown up. She is still as powerful as when she was young. But with that fairy-like appearance, even if Qingzhon and sister face each other, she won't be able to recognize sister." The more He Zhu spoke, the wider the smile on her face became. "Just wait and see. When my sister comes out, that Hellion Wei Wei will know what it means to be ashamed of herself. Even without His Highness making a choice, she will lose miserably. What's more, there won't be any doubt about His Highness' choice. That is sister, the person who accompanied His Highness before we even had men of sacrifice. Baimai admitted that Heizhu had convinced her. At that moment, she even had the urge to tell Heizhu about Belegaju's whereabouts. But after thinking about it, she calmed down. Just wait. She told herself that since sister had appeared, he believed that it wouldn't be long before the two of them met. His Highness had always hated others interfering in his affairs. Some things were better left to nature. This is the first test for you to join the battle spirit forces. Huan Mingxiong handed the paper to Helian Vivian and Yun Biluo. Find the old member of the battle spirit forces in the White Academy. In his hands, there is the next place you need to go. Helian Vivian raised her beautiful eyebrows. Find someone? Biluo should be fine. Luonyang seemed to be very confident in the person she brought in. Huan Mingxiong's expression didn't change as he faced Wei Wei and said, "You guys have 2 chances to ask for help. If you really can't find this old member, you can ask the guide for information about this old member. In order to ensure absolute fairness, the 2 of us also don't know who this old member is. The key is that he has to admit it himself." Helian Vivian instantly understood. In fact, there was no difficulty in the beginning. The difficult part was the end. Even if they found the old member, he wouldn't admit it. After all, the concealment of the battle spirit forces was sometimes more important than anything else. Listen carefully. You only have 3 days. Huan Mingxiong looked at the distant moon. After 3 days, we will see the answer. Yun Biluo smiled gently with a faint cough. This kind of competition is really interesting. I hope Miss Helian will give me more advice in the future. Okay. Helian Vivian said, but her long eyebrows furrowed. Yuan Ming raised his thin lips. Woman, what's wrong? Do you think you can't beat her? According to my experience, this kind of question tests one's observation ability in the early stages and tests one's cooperation ability in the later stages. After all, Helian Vivian was the Queen of Arms. She had a special background, so she knew very well what the other party's ultimate goal was. Yuan Ming smiled. You mean, you want to cooperate with that woman? I'm just saying what the other party's ultimate goal is. As for cooperation, Helian Vivian curled his thin lips. It depends on whether the other party is willing or not. Don't you always praise her for being interesting? Yuan Ming's eyes had an additional trace of innocence. It is indeed very interesting. Yuan Xiaoming, you are a demon. Helian Vivian casually communicated with Yuan Ming through consciousness. Basically, the words of a demon should be heard the opposite way. Hearing this, Yuan Ming was stunned, then laughed. Woman, are you sure you haven't been to hell in your previous life? I'm really surprised that you know so much about us demons. So it's best not to hide anything from me in the future. Helian Vivian's thin lips curved. Yuan Ming glanced at the crescent moon in the sky. We are talking about you and the third prince again. Don't hold a grudge against me. I am thinking for you. Isn't the way you get along with each other now? Speaking of the third prince, Helian Vivian seemed to have thought of something suddenly. Oh no. What? Huan Mingxiong looked at her in confusion. Is there a problem? Helian Vivian packed her things and turned around. No, but I still have an appointment. I'll leave first. This girl is in such a hurry to leave. Huan Mingxiong looked at Helian Vivian's disappearing figure and couldn't help but shake his head. It was enough to show how much he doted on Helian Vivian. Yun Biluo retracted her gaze and said to Huan Mingxiong and Luonyang, Seniors, I'll leave too. Wait a minute. Luonyang stopped Yun Biluo. You don't want the news too? Yun Biluo smiled gently. If Miss Helian doesn't want it, I don't want it either. Then there will be more to see. Huan Mingxiong stroked his long white beard meaningfully. Both of them don't want to give me a hint. This is the first time I've seen this since I became a guide. Girl, could it be that you and Wei Wei have a grudge against each other? Yun Biluo's eyes were smiling. Elder Huan, what are you talking about? We bumped into each other yesterday, but she took my things by mistake, so I want to get them back from her. Oh. Huan Mingxiong already had a plan in mind. However, his expression didn't change as usual. What is it that's worth it for you to compete with her? Yun Biluo seemed to be very surprised. Her eyes widened, full of innocence. Elder Huan, why do you say that? I don't mean to compare with her. Then, she curled her lips. Moreover, I don't think it's necessary for us to compare. Elder Huan, don't worry too much. After that, Yun Biluo nodded at Luan Yang and walked into the night. Huan Ming Xiong muttered in his heart. He didn't know why, but he always felt that this girl looked familiar, but when he thought about it carefully, he didn't see her anywhere. But generally, newly selected students would have a competitive mentality. Huan Ming Xiong had seen this kind of thing many times, so he didn't pay much attention to it. At this moment, Luan Yang spoke. Helian Wei has underestimated how easy it is to find this person. This person has been staying in the White Academy for a very long time, yet he was able to hide from us. This means that he is not that easy to find. Helian Vivian thought it was too easy, but that Yun Biluo didn't think it was that simple. Huan Ming Xiong didn't comment. Luan Yang smiled. Elder Huan, I don't mean anything else, but for so many years, the battle spirit forces chose from people who were experienced and knowledgeable. Yun Biluo was recommended by the elders, and I have seen her foundation. She is very good. Not only is her martial chi amazing, even her disguise skills are very good. As for Helian Vivian, I know she has done a lot of shocking things recently, but Elder Huan, you should understand that to find this person, it's not enough to rely on martial chi alone, it also requires a strong observation skill. Do you think Helian Vivian can do it? Huan Ming Xiong smiled faintly, but he didn't tell Luan Yang that at that time, it was Helian Vivian who exposed his disguise as an old man sweeping the floor. Don't ever look down on that girl. Chapter 291. Woman, why are you running so fast? Yuan Ming, who was in the ancient book, felt dizzy from all the shaking. Hearing this, Helian Vivian stopped. You're right. Why am I running so fast? I'm already late anyway. It's closing time now. Yuan Ming lazily said, have you forgotten the rules of your academy? It seems that it's the power of love that made you climb the wall in the middle of the night. Helian Vivian supported herself with one hand and easily jumped over. Just as she was about to reply to Yuan Ming, a gentle voice came from behind her. A gentle cough came from behind, followed by a faint medicinal fragrance. It was very deep and pleasant to the ears. Helian Vivian subconsciously looked back. She saw that the page boy standing beside that person looked as if he had seen a ghost. He was about to shout, someone. However, he was gently interrupted by the man. Xiao Ju, don't be rude. But she. Little Ju had lived for so long, but she had never seen a lady from a wealthy family climb a wall. Even a female bandit would not be so brazen. Moreover, the White Academy had a curfew. If someone like her, who openly disregarded the Academy's rules, was caught, she would definitely be expelled from the Academy. When Helian Wei saw that she had been discovered, she did not bother to hide. She saw the man sitting under the big tree that was full of blooming locust flowers, with a teacup beside his hand, as well as a white jade and black stone chessboard. She smiled and said, young Master Wu Shuang is so elegant. Let's drink. Jing Wu Shuang was a person who could not be hated. Especially when coupled with her brilliant temperament, it was very easy for people to let go of their hearts. Helian Vivian looked at the dim light in the distance and thought for a moment before saying, no, the Academy has rules. Men and women are not allowed to touch each other. I'll drink with young Master Wu Shuang after I leave the Academy. Xiao Ju opened her mouth. She thought, you even climbed the wall, why do you care about the Academy rules? Jing Wu Shuang had a faint smile on his face. Since that's the case, I won't keep Miss Wei. See you in class tomorrow. Okay. Wei's lips curved into a smile as her beautiful figure shuttled back and forth within the courtyard. Xiao Ju, who was standing beside Jing Wu Shuang, curled his lips and said, young master, that woman is obviously lying to you. Young master treating her to tea is a compliment to her, but she is so perfunctory. Little Ju, do you know who she is? Jing Wu Shuang placed her white chess piece down. Xiao Ju shook her head. I don't know him. You don't leave the manor, so naturally you don't know him. Jing Wu Shuang backhandedly ate a black chess piece. She's Helian Wei, the one who was just married into the third prince's family. You remember, you can't offend this person. Xiao Ju disagreed. Just because she's the third princess consort? No. Jing Wushuang placed the last stone and reversed the situation. Because the person who won against my Wu Xiu was her. Xiao Ju was so shocked that she forgot what she wanted to say. After a while, she said, "But young master, didn't you say that you would marry the person who won against your Wu Xiu? Now, this." Jing Wushuang didn't say anything else. She only paused for a moment. A gentle breeze blew past her face, and her ivory white robes fluttered in the wind. "Little Ju, don't say such things in the future. It will ruin her reputation." "Yes." Xiao Ju lowered her eyes, but her heart was itching like a cat's paw. In all these years, she had never seen young master have any special feelings for that woman. He was so polite to everyone. Even when he rejected them, no one would feel disgusted. However, this Hellion Vivian was a little different. This was the first time Xiao Ju had seen young master take the initiative to invite someone to tea. It was a pity that the other party was a married woman. "You're saying that it was because she met Jing Wushuang midway that I had to wait for so long?" Beligaju coldly curled his thin lips, as if he didn't care. He loosened his collar with one hand, and the other hand lazily hung by his side. A cold light like splashed ink leaked out of his eyes, and he looked like he was smiling. However, those familiar with him knew that he wasn't smiling. The shadow guard who came to report only knew what he saw. He didn't know where Hellion Vivian had gone. Following the principle of saying less mistakes could be made, he lowered his eyes. Unbeknownst to her, her silent acquiescence caused Bailey Jiaoju's pair of deep eyes to slowly form a layer of frost. This made Hellion Vivian, who had just walked in, feel like she had been silently implicated. When Beligaju saw her, he calmly ordered the shadow guards, "You can leave first." "Yes." After the others left, the room became very quiet. It was so quiet that even the sound of insects couldn't be heard. Perhaps it was because Beligaju had recovered his martial chi, and his body carried the aura of the fire Qilin. Usually, there were very few people in a place where the king of divine beasts lived. However, because it was too quiet, there was a slightly low pressure. Hellion Vivian felt that she was in the wrong. She glanced at the white moonlight and said, "There were a lot of things to do today, so I came late." "If there were a lot of things to do, you could have asked the shadow to tell me. However, you didn't say anything." Beligaju's voice was very calm. Hellion Vivian hadn't expected this. Looking at the arrangement on his table, she knew that he had been waiting for a long time. However, she was too guarded to use the shadow. After the incident with He Zhu, she wasn't used to using other people. Beligaju looked at her and said, "You didn't take this matter to heart, or you are not willing to be with me at all." Hellion Vivian admitted that when she was busy, she did forget about this matter. However, she said, "I didn't do it on purpose. It's not that I'm unwilling. I'm just too busy." "Too busy?" Beligaju slightly curved the corner of his mouth. "That kind of coldness." Hellion Vivian understood in an instant. "You are still looking for someone to follow me until now?" Beligaju didn't deny it. He had always done this. Hellion Vivian closed her eyes and was silent for a moment before saying, "If your highness doesn't trust me so much, why did you sign that contract? Since it's like this, I think that you and I need to think carefully about whether this contract should exist or not." Beligaju looked at her and said coldly, "You want to terminate the contract?" Hellion Vivian didn't say anything. Beligaju threw his robe to the side. The temperature of his body seemed to have dropped to the extreme. "Do as you wish." After that, he went into the inner room without looking back. Hellion Vivian looked at his back for a long time. The relationship between the two of them seemed to be very strong, but in fact, it was very fragile. Just like what people said. The reason why the two of them were together was because he had to deal with the retired emperor. The retired emperor seemed to be very satisfied with the two of them. This unconsciously reduced a lot of pressure on Beligaju. Here, it was not like in the palace where he was watched everywhere. He didn't need to show off his love, so it didn't matter. She reckoned that the third prince had figured this out, which was why he gave her such an answer. Chapter 292. Are we going back just like that? Yuan Ming turned around and looked at the tall and straight figure standing in front of the window. He smirked. It's good to go back. Woman, you better move faster, in case someone catches you and jumps over the wall. Hellion Vivian felt that Yuan Ming was unusually talkative today. However, Hellion Vivian still picked up her pace and jumped over the high wall in 2 or 3 steps. Bang! As Hellion Vivian disappeared, the candlelight in front of the window seemed to be extinguished all of a sudden. Even the teacups on the table were shattered to pieces on the floor. And Ying's scalp went numb. The person who shattered the teacups did not have any expression on his face. He just walked over slowly and unbuttoned his clothes. And Ying could not help but let out a sigh of relief. He stepped back slowly and closed the door. He reached out and touched his forehead. It was all sweaty. It was rare to see His Highness like this. The next day, before the sun had even risen, Wei Wei had already leapt to the highest point of the entire White Academy, observing each and every move of every student. Woman, looking for him like this is like looking for a needle in a haystack. It was the first time that Yuan Ming woke up so early. He was still excited. Why don't you find a teacher and threaten him? Hellion Vivian yawned. I don't want to be kicked out of the academy. Are we just going to stand here all the time? Yuan Ming looked at the empty surroundings. Hellion Vivian glanced at him. What are you afraid of? Qing Zhon will send us food anyway. Don't you have to go to class? Yuan Ming raised his eyebrows. Hellion Vivian smiled gently. I applied for leave. The teacher actually gave it to you. When did the little old man who wanted to strangle this woman to death become so easy to talk to? Hellion Vivian covered her small belly and rubbed it back and forth. Women always have a few days of discomfort in a month. That's what I told him. Yuan Ming paused and covered his face silently. That little old man must have gone crazy when he heard what you said. No, he didn't. He just blushed as if I did something to him. Hellion Vivian yawned again with tiredness. I really don't have any thoughts about that old man. Yuan Ming. He was also speechless towards this woman. However, later, he found out that Hellion Vivian was really not feeling well. He frowned and picked a few strawberries for Hellion Vivian to replenish her vitality. After eating the strawberries, Hellion Wei Wei finally felt better. She hugged her little tummy and stayed in a daze for a while. She felt a little uncomfortable from the heat and her face looked pale. Third sister-in-law. This time, the little 7th prince was not holding a meat bun. He was dressed very majestically. There were 2 other little bald heads on his left and right. He looked like a little emperor on patrol. Hellion Vivian did not lie, a little. Little 7th prince frowned solemnly and ordered the 2 people on his left and right, go to third brother and tell him that third sister-in-law is not feeling well. Yes. The 2 little baldies were about to fly away. Hellion Vivian reached out and pulled them back. It's not that bad. I'll just sit here for a while. You guys can leave. The 2 little baldies subconsciously looked at little 7th prince. Little 7th prince waved his hand. That kind of aura was exactly the same as his third brother's. Hellion Vivian found it interesting. I've never seen these 2 little baldies before. Third brother asked me to choose the shadow guards. Little 7th prince said with vigor, these 2 are more pleasing to the eye. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. Logically speaking, only the person most likely to inherit the throne would have his own shadow guards. Needless to say, the royal guards were appointed by the retired emperor himself. Now that the man asked little 7th to choose the shadow guards, his meaning was obvious. He would be the one who came up with the plan and little 7th would inherit the throne in the end. But does anyone else know about this? This was what Hellion Wei Wei was worried about. If anyone knew about Bailey Jiaoju's thoughts, the little one would be in a very dangerous situation. Sure enough, little 7th shook his head and sat beside Hellion Vivian like a little tiger. Last year, third brother told me not to tell anyone about this. Then why did you tell me? Hellion Vivian thought for a while. Since last year? How deep was His Highness' plan? The little one raised his head and said domineeringly, your third sister-in-law, not anyone else. Hellion Vivian wanted to hug the child again. He was so punk. If you run out of jerky in the future, ask for it from me. I'll get someone to buy it for you. Okay. Indeed, he would not be happy without meat. His eyes lit up. The little one looked at her. You really don't need to tell third brother. No. Hellion Vivian waved her hand. The little one put down the wooden stick in his hand. Then you'll miss a chance to fight for favor. This won't do. Hellion Vivian was amused. You know what it means to fight for favor. When I was young, I wanted to see third brother. I would cry out in pain and third brother would come and feed me meat. The little one was definitely imparting his experience with a serious look on his face. But, was it really good to eat meat when one was sick? Obviously, the royal family had no common sense in taking care of people. Little Seventh didn't know much either. How did these two brothers grow up? Wei Wei heaved a long sigh and pondered, could it be that you haven't heard people say that your third brother married me in order to deal with retired emperor? You still treat me as one of your own and gave me so many instructions. Don't listen to their nonsense. The little one jumped down and looked at Hellion Vivian with a serious face. Shadow listened at the side and felt relieved. He didn't expect the little seventh prince to be so sensible. He even knew how to explain for his highness. However, the little one's next sentence almost made him vomit blood. He said, third brother married you because you can cook well. Shadow. Yuan Ming. Hellion Vivian. She didn't even know that the royal family had taken a fancy to her cooking skills. It's fine as long as you can cook well. The little one snorted and was very cold. What do they know? Shadow. Indeed, they didn't know. She could become a princess just because she could cook well. What the hell was this? Ha ha ha, as expected of little seventh. Nangong Lai sat on the chair and laughed so hard that his stomach hurt. Ju, I've known you for so long, but this is the first time I've heard that you would choose a princess for food. Belagaju looked at him indifferently. Nangong Lai saw that Belagaju's expression was really unfriendly, so he immediately sat up straight. Belagaju stood up and took the white handkerchief from Shadow's hand to wipe his hands. Nangong Lai leaned back, but the academy doesn't seem to be very peaceful recently. There are 2 transfer students all of a sudden. Ju, that girl, you didn't see her. She's really pretty, and she looks a little familiar. Shadow heard this and his heart skipped a beat. Belagaju, however, seemed to be a little absent-minded. Nangong Lai raised his eyebrows and continued, do you want to come with me to have a look? Chapter 293. Not interested. These 3 words were like ice beads, freezing the air in the room. Shadow let out a long sigh and relaxed his nerves. Nangong Lai glanced back and gave Shadow a meaningful look. Then, he took his fan and walked out. But when he passed by Shadow, the corner of his mouth hooked up into a wicked smile. Shadow, your behavior today is a bit strange. Don't tell me you're hiding something from your highness. Shadow's whole body stiffened, and he couldn't say a word. Nangong Lai was very satisfied with the result he caused. He smiled and left the room. This group of people was really boring. They were not as likable as Little Seven, that little tiger head. But that little tiger head really bit whoever he caught. Other than Ju, he didn't dare to provoke him. The rest of the people couldn't catch him at all. However, this little tiger head was very obedient now. It extended one of its little hands for Hellion Wei Wei to hold, while the other little hand was eating the jerky. It looked at her with round eyes and said, this is the place where I usually practice my martial arts. As he said, he bent down and lifted a huge rock with his little hand. He lifted it up and put it aside with ease, as if he was inviting someone into his house. Hellion Vivian looked at the cave. There was nothing strange about it, just that the temperature was relatively moderate. Xiaoyi, make way. Hellion Vivian just had this thought when she saw the little one driving away the huge monster in front of him. There was no sense of uneasiness in his expression at all. That's a magical beast. Yuan Ming opened his mouth, with a hint of evil in his voice. I didn't expect that someone would dare to raise a magical beast in the White Academy. This little 7th prince is really bold. The magical beast named Xiao Yi moved its eyeballs, as if it sensed the danger emitted by Hellion Vivian. Its blood-red eyes stared straight at Hellion Vivian. Little Tiger Head patted it. Xiao Yi, don't be rude. That's my sister-in-law. If you're rude to her, third brother will release the fire Cheline to bite you. Be good and make way, I'm going to sleep. The magical beast actually listened to little Seven's words and moved inside. Probably because of the magical beast, the temperature in the cave was lower, so it was very comfortable to stay inside. Hellion Vivian and little Tiger Head sat side by side. She looked up at the cave and asked, "How did this magical beast come in? It shouldn't be stupid enough to come in by itself. That day when I was practicing martial arts on the mountain, I met the injured Xiao Yi, so I picked him up and brought him back." Hellion Wei Wei once again visually estimated student Xiao Yi's size. "Little Seven, can you not speak as if you picked up an egg? Is this guy big enough to be picked up?" Little Tiger Head rubbed the magical beast's head. Although he was only a little tall, he still acted like a master. "The forest of fantasy has been very chaotic recently. When I first picked Xiao Yi up, his face was covered in blood. Now he's quite healthy. I wanted to take him out for a walk, but third brother said it wasn't the right time yet." Hellion Vivian chuckled. "Take him out for a walk? Do you want him to stomp 3 people to death with one paw? Or do you want all the students in the academy to complain to the dean? Your third brother is right. It's not the right time yet." Hellion Vivian thought for a moment, then fed the magical beast a strawberry. That strawberry was plucked from the spiritual realm. Other than being able to strengthen one's body and improve one's skin, it also had a miraculous effect on healing the wounds of magical beasts and spirit beasts. In order to avoid the heavenly tribulation, Little White had been staying in there all this time. It would probably be out soon. After swallowing the strawberry, the magical beast glanced at Hellion Vivian, then took the initiative to move a little closer. Little Tiger Head happily leaned against his big, soft body. His eyes were already sleepy, but he still forced himself to nag at Hellion Vivian. "The dean won't let me eat meat again." "Why?" Hellion Vivian pulled the little guy closer to her so that he could sleep more comfortably. Little Tiger Head's voice became even more muffled. "I beat the Uncle Masters up and didn't let them go to the toilet." Hellion Vivian's mouth twitched. "Who taught you this method?" Third brother said that beating people up isn't good. You have to make them feel mentally broken. When I'm in class, the teachers always don't let me go to the toilet. I felt that this was very frustrating, so I let them have a taste of it. Little Tiger Head nodded and poked into Hellion Vivian's arms. Hellion Vivian rubbed her temples helplessly. They were indeed brothers. However, is it normal for magical beasts to appear near the school? Hellion Vivian asked Yuan Ming. Yuan Ming raised his eyebrows. It's not normal. But you have to ask Little White for the details. He knows more about these beasts than I do. Hellion Vivian nodded and didn't say anything more. She hugged the soft little guy in her arms and closed her eyes. When the two of them woke up, it was already time for dinner. Qing Zhon stood outside the cave, hesitating whether to go in or not. Then she saw Hellion Vivian holding the little 7th prince's hand and walking out. Little Tiger Head didn't treat Qing Zhon like how he treated Hellion Vivian. He glanced at her and asked, "Aren't you Li's man? Why are you with third sister-in-law?" Qing Zhon knelt on one knee respectfully. "7th prince, I am a royal man of sacrifice. I was mainly responsible for protecting young Master Li. I was only transferred to Princess Consort's side 2 days ago." "Oh, so she was third elder brother's man." Little Tiger Head put the stone back to its original position without thinking. Hellion Vivian looked around and didn't find any suitable place to eat. She held Little Tiger Head's hand and went to a pavilion in the superior compound. Little Tiger Head loved to eat meat. He bit on the bone with his small teeth and was so obedient that Qing Zhon couldn't believe it. She thought that no one could control the little 7th prince except for the 3rd prince. Otherwise, the retired emperor wouldn't send the little 7th prince to the mountain to cultivate his character. She didn't expect. Qing Zhon's gaze fell on Hellion Vivian, who was wiping the little 7th prince's mouth with a handkerchief. She understood instantly. She thought that the only person who could get close to the little 7th prince purely because of love was the princess consort. The rest of the people were either for fame or profit. And those ladies from the officials' families, They got close to the little seventh prince just to get the attention of His Highness. But they forgot that although the little seventh prince was young, his way of doing things was more vicious than His Highness. As a child born in the royal family, how could he not see through their little tricks? It was probably because he saw too much, so when they heard the little seventh prince's name in the palace, they looked like they heard a tiger that could bite people. Hellion Vivian thought that little tiger head was very interesting. He looked prickly but was comfortable to touch. When he was full, his soft and white belly would be exposed to the sun. Hellion Vivian was enjoying it when she heard a chuckle not far away. We do have fate. Hellion Vivian couldn't help but look up and saw Unveils, who was dressed in a long dress, standing under the flower tree. She had a pretty face and a fresh temperament. She was even prettier than Hellion Jiaoa, who was following behind her. Chapter 294. Qing Zhon looked in the direction of the voice and looked over slowly. The next moment, she was in a trance. Why did she feel that this person was so familiar to her? Unveils took a step forward, the dangling hair ornament on her head swayed. She looked at the little person sitting beside Hellion Vivian and smiled. Is this the seventh prince? Little Tiger Head pulled himself out from the world of ribs and said coldly, "Get lost." Unveils was stunned for a moment, but she was not angry. Instead, the smile on her face grew wider. Hellion Vivian looked at her lazily with one hand behind her back. She looked like a loose ruffian. Unveils did not know who in the Dragon War Empire could make Hellion Jiaoa willingly walk behind. Just like what Yuan Xiaoming said, this Unveils was really interesting. Moreover, Hellion Jiaoa's complacent silence made Hellion Vivian raise her eyebrows playfully. Unveils looked at the person beside her with a faint smile. Since the seventh prince does not welcome us, let's go somewhere else. As she spoke, she walked towards the pavilion and lowered her body. She said in a voice that only Hellion Vivian and the seventh prince could hear, "You're really my brother. You're exactly like His Highness." Little Tiger Head did not expect such a reply from Unveils. He paused in the middle of chewing the ribs and looked up at Unveils. Unveils did not say anything more. She smiled and nodded at Hellion Vivian. The playfulness in Hellion Vivian's eyes deepened. She was not talking to Little Seven, but to her. So she was an old acquaintance of the royal family. No wonder he kept appearing in front of her again and again. Hellion Vivian supported her chin with her fingers and slowly rubbed the ribs. She gave Unveils an unfathomable smile. Unveils narrowed her eyes. She could keep her composure. She had underestimated this Hellion Vivian. Let's go. Unveils finished her sentence with a smile. When she turned around, her eyes were emitting a faint cold light. Hellion Vivian ate her food as usual. The pain in her stomach made her feel even more lethargic. After separating from Little Tiger Head, she decided to go do her own things. In any case, the royal family didn't really need her to deal with the retired emperor, so she probably didn't need to go to Beligaju's place at night. Hellion Vivian yawned. Just as she was preparing to return home, she saw a flash in front of her eyes. Murong Chang Feng, whom she hadn't seen for a long time, actually blocked her path. "Let's have a chat." Murong Chang Feng's voice was very low. When dealing with scumbags, Hellion Vivian would not show any mercy. "I don't think there's any need for me to continue talking to you. Don't you want to know why the royal family married you?" Murong Chang Feng looked at her as she turned around to leave and suddenly raised his voice. Hellion Vivian was not interested at all and continued to walk forward. Murong Chang Feng clenched his fists. "Hellion Vivian, you don't really think that he likes you, do you? Hellion Vivian, use your brain and think carefully. What kind of man is he? What kind of woman can't he get if he wants? He married you only because the person he cares about is coming back, so he can use you as a shield. Otherwise, why didn't he know to help you guard against the 4 great families when he's so smart? He's just using you as a weapon. You can do whatever you want now, but when you're no longer useful to him, do you know what will happen to you? Not only will you be criticized by everyone, but you'll also lose your title as the 3rd princess consort. If you're no longer the 3rd princess consort, with your little profound heaven, how can you fight against the 4 great families? Not to mention others, even the third prince. Do you think he will let a chess piece who knows too many of his secrets stay until the end? You know better than anyone why he sent so many shadows around you. Even I need time to get rid of those shadows. When the time comes, you won't be able to escape even if you have wings. No wonder there were no shadows behind her from the beginning. Not only the shadows, even Qingzhon was nowhere to be found. Hellion Vivian stopped in her tracks. When she looked back, her eyes were filled with hostility. What does my situation have to do with you? Murong Changfeng, I'm too lazy to care about you. Don't always come here looking for trouble. A warning made Murong Changfeng angry. Everything he said was for the good of this woman, but this woman didn't know what was good for her at all. Good, very good. I'll take it that I'm meddling in other people's business. I'd like to see to what extent you'll be played like a monkey by the third prince. Murong Changfeng flicked his sleeves and left. There was a strong sense of unwillingness on his face. Hellion Vivian didn't even look at him. She continued to walk forward. She seemed to be at ease, but her eyes were a little low. She didn't know if it was because it was time, but the pain in her lower abdomen was more obvious. She really missed the brown sugar water of the 21st century. And those brothers in the Tang sect. Yuan Ming was silent for a long time before he spoke. Woman, no matter what, he was right about one thing. The heart of an emperor is unfathomable. I know. Hellion Vivian's voice was as lazy and calm as usual. When I decided to cooperate with the royal family, I knew what kind of situation I would encounter. But there was one thing that was beyond my expectations. If he has someone in his heart, it's really not suitable for us to cooperate anymore. Yuan Ming didn't speak. Hellion Vivian turned the umbrella that turned into a bracelet. Her eyes were faint, and there was a hint of mockery at the corner of her mouth. Indeed, it's better to rely on yourself than anyone else. Yuan Ming looked at her for a while before he said, Woman, don't forget that you still have the military seal and me. Hellion Vivian smiled. Of course I didn't forget. I know very well what I'm doing. If I don't send Hellion Guang Yarrow to hell personally, my rebirth in this life would be in vain. It's great that you can think this way. Yuan Ming realized that he really didn't know how to comfort people. What followed was a period of speechless silence. However, at this moment, Qingzhon was standing in front of Yun Biluo. There was a faint light in her eyes. If it wasn't because of what Heizhu said to her before, she might not have suspected anything. But now, this person, Qingzhon's sight changed along with Yun Biluo. Yun Biluo seemed to have seen her a long time ago, but she didn't plan to do anything. She looked back at her with gentle eyes. Qingzhon paused for a while before she took a step forward. She still retained the characteristics of a man of sacrifice. She wouldn't say much. Even if the other party was problematic, it was obviously not the right place to solve these problems. However, at this moment, Yun Biluo spoke with a smile in her voice. Since you recognized me, why didn't you come and say hello? Qingzhon, I haven't seen you for so many years. You've grown so tall. You're really different from the little girl back then. Chapter 295. Qingzhon's fingers stiffened. She then took a deep breath. Sister, is it really you? Yun Biluo smiled gently. If it's not me, who else could it be? I'm just a little surprised. Qingzhon recovered from the initial shock. After all, we all thought you were gone at that time. Yun Biluo's gaze froze. Silly girl, I'm still fine. Qingzhon glanced at her again. She did not know what to say. After all, after a long time, they would be unfamiliar with each other. Moreover, she had a taciturn personality. Yun Biluo seemed to know her very well. She smiled again. Come with me. Let's talk about how you guys have been all these years. Qingzhon looked at the smile at the corner of her mouth and then looked at the setting sun. Not now. She added, I have to protect the princess consort. Yun Biluo's smiling face froze for a moment. However, she quickly raised the corner of her lips and automatically ignored the word princess consort. Oh yeah, I forgot to ask you. Why are you not with young Master Lai? Why are you here? Sister. Qingzhon suddenly interrupted Yun Biluo. For so many years, you never thought of coming back. Why do you want to come back now that His Highness is married? Yun Biluo's watery eyes immediately turned red. Qingzhon, it's not that I don't want to come back. It's that the retired emperor will not allow me to appear. Sister, you don't have to explain so much to her. He Zhu, who was listening at the side, suddenly jumped out and looked at Qingzhon with a cold smile. This girl has been bewitched by Hellion Vivian. She can't even differentiate between right and wrong. Yun Biluo looked extremely upset and shook her head at He Zhu. Qingzhon did not want things to go to this point. However, she raised her head and looked at He Zhu. It's you who can't differentiate between right and wrong, not me. He Zhu, don't forget. His Highness is our master. As she spoke, she looked deeply at Yun Biluo. The tears of her former sister made her feel very uncomfortable. However, this incident was weird from the beginning to the end. She had to be careful. He Zhu, don't talk about little Qing like that. She has her own difficulties. Yun Biluo took a deep breath and coughed softly. When she looked at Qingzhon again, she was already smiling like a pear blossom. Qingzhon knew that since ancient times, benevolence and righteousness could not be fulfilled at the same time, so she left without hesitation. Sister, why are you being so nice to an ungrateful thing? He Zhu's voice was cold. It's a pity that sister still cares about her. She's just a white-eyed wolf. Yun Biluo did not say anything else. She just looked at Qingzhon's departing figure and slowly narrowed her eyes. Of course, Qingzhon heard the scolding behind her. Her fingers tightened on the long sword that she was wearing and then slowly loosened. What she was most worried about now was how to tell the Princess Consort about this. Does your Highness know that my sister is still alive? His Highness was also at White Academy now, and it was very likely that he would see his sister. If His Highness knew about this, how would he treat Princess Consort? Qingzhon flinched at that moment. She didn't want to hurt the woman who had helped her when she thought she was in the abyss. The sun was setting in the west, and so was the twilight. Hellion Vivian, who was silent at first, stood up, as if she had sorted out her thoughts. She clapped her hands. All right, let's pack up. Let's go find the legendary old member. Really? Yuan Ming was really surprised. Haven't you been taking care of the child since the beginning? How could there be any news about the old member? Hellion Vivian raised her lips. Let me give you a question first. Let's say that there are 2 inns in front of you now, and there are guests in each of the inns. One day, a scholar woke up in the middle of the night to go to the toilet. He lit up the oil lamp, only to find that there was a person opposite him who was nailing another person to the wall with a nail. He was stunned. When he was about to lie down, he saw that the person who was holding the nail suddenly raised his head and looked in his direction. He pointed at him and said something with conviction. Guess what the person who was holding the nail was saying? What else could it be? He must be saying that the next one is you. As a demon, Yuan Ming was very confident in the answer he gave. Hellion Vivian lifted her eyelids. Wrong. Wrong. Yuan Ming didn't believe it. He had never been so curious about an answer. Then, what was the person holding the nail saying? Hellion Vivian raised her eyes. He was counting, muttering 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He was counting which room you lived in. When Yuan Ming heard this, his hair stood on end. Hellion Vivian continued, ordinary people will subconsciously think from the scholar's point of view. Under normal circumstances, the answer given would be the same as what you said. But the real murderer will directly act from the beginning. In the place where I used to live, the American FBI will give a few questions to test who is the serial killer. There are very few people who can answer more than 60% of the questions correctly, unless they are psychopaths. This method only tells us one thing. If we want to find the person, the first step is to think from the other person's point of view. That way, it will be more efficient. So, Yuan Ming forced himself to pull out his thoughts from that strange case. He raised his eyebrows. Who do you think the old member of the Battle Spirit Forces is? Hellion Vivian smiled. First of all, I think this member won't be very old. According to the general undercover deployment, the leader can be an old man like Elder Huan. But the real member of the Battle Spirit Forces, who can hide in the White Academy, must be a man in his 30s. This age not only means that his body is strong, but also that he can better carry out various activities. Moreover, his identity must be higher than Elder Juan's. This is the rule that any mercenary will follow. The higher the identity of the person, the deeper he will hide. Not only the people on the periphery, even the leader may not know his true identity. Moreover, the real battle power is usually concentrated in the 30s. Another point, if I am the person in charge of the battle spirit forces, in order to understand the qualifications of the students in the White Academy, I have already prepared my own fresh students. I must be a person who can check the information whenever I want to, and also be able to cover up the students who are carrying out the mission at any time. Only then can I maintain the mystery of the battle spirit forces. Thinking about it this way, having absolute power, not choosing a faction, and being able to move freely among the big families, there is only one person in the White Academy who meets these conditions. Chapter 296. White Academy's headmaster, Tu Su Feng. Helian Vivian's tone dropped, as if she had made the final decision. Yuan Ming stroked his chin. Woman, you must not let others hear these thoughts of yours. Be careful not to let others find out and treat you as an outsider, cutting the weeds and eliminating the roots. You don't need to tell me, I know. Helian Vivian flicked the weed in her hand. We can leave now, but it's not time to find the headmaster yet. The most important thing is to think about how to make him admit it personally. Yuan Ming raised his eyebrows. Woman, I find that you're not the least bit flustered. If Third Prince is really like Murong Changfeng, won't you be sad? Helian Vivian paused her footsteps and stood with her back to the light, her long hair slightly fluttering. When I was young, someone told me to not rely on others. That will make me vulnerable. Oh. Yuan Ming smiled. I like people who can say this kind of thing. Helian Vivian curved her thin lips and used his old words to stop him. Give up, there's no end to human-demon love. What's more, he's still a straight man, he won't be interested in you. Yuan Ming glared. Woman, you can't have an old lover behind Third Prince's back, right? Look at you, you're reluctant to part with him. What to do, you really guessed right. Helian Wei joked as she took a step forward and walked towards the inferior compound. Indeed, there was nothing wrong. She was just like this. In this world, no one could truly empathize with another person's pain. Your heart was pierced by thousands of arrows, you were in so much pain that you wished you were dead, it was only your own matter. Others may sympathize with you, may sigh, but they would never know to what extent your wound had festered to. Perhaps, there really was such a person. When your period came, he couldn't wait to take your place. But, regretfully, she had never met such a person. So, it didn't matter whether she was sad or not. This way, she could go into battle with a light pack in the midst of war. However, since she was on her period, she couldn't even pack lightly even if she wanted to. When Helian Wei returned to the inferior compound, she started to lie on the bed and pretend to be a corpse. She covered herself with a thick blanket. This was the scene that Qing Zhon saw when she came back. She quickly asked Helian Vivian what happened. Helian Vivian sat up with the quilt and waved her hand. Isn't it time for dinner? Yes, Qing Zhon looked at Helian Vivian's pale face. I'll go look for His Highness. Helian Vivian carelessly pulled the blanket closer to her chest and said, Your Highness is not a doctor. Why do you need him? Besides, it's not convenient for a doctor to treat my illness. At this time, the cafeteria must have run out of food. Come with me to the commerce courtyard and have a bowl of hot soup. Qing Zhon then retracted her leg and looked at Helian Vivian's expression. Thinking about Yun Biluo, she could not help but feel a little absent-minded. So much so that she did not hear Helian Vivian calling her 3 times in a row. Helian Vivian reached out her hand helplessly and waved in front of her eyes. Qing Zhon was stunned. Princess. You've finally come back to your senses. Helian Vivian pointed at the door frame in front of her. It's better to watch when you're walking to avoid the danger of disfigurement. Qing Zhon paused and replied, Yes. Helian Vivian yawned and looked at her slowly. If it's because of Miss Yun who suddenly appeared today that made you like this, you don't have to. Qing Zhon did not expect to hear the words Miss Yun from Helian Vivian. She suddenly looked up and her eyes were fixed. Princess knew. What did she know? How much did she know? Qing Zhon had to admit that she was a little flustered at that moment. So, Princess, don't mind my sister. Sister is a thing of the past. Since His Highness chose you, he must have his reasons. Qing Zhon's voice was very calm. She tried to be calm, but in the end, it was obvious that she was not confident enough. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and smiled suddenly. It seems that you have a good relationship. Qing Zhon did not realize the meaning of that smile. She was only thinking about what to say to minimize the damage. We are all men of sacrifice who follow His Highness. When I entered the palace, my sister was already there. She was the one who followed His Highness the longest. As his personal maid, she took care of His Highness since he was young. She knew His Highness's way of doing things better than any of us. His Highness also. Qing Zhon paused and continued, His Highness also treated her well. It's just that a big fire destroyed everything. His Highness was seriously injured at that time. When he woke up, everything had changed. My sister was missing and His Highness lost his martial qi. He was unprecedentedly depressed. At that time, we all thought that my sister was dead. We didn't expect that she was still alive. The reason why she didn't come back was that the retired emperor didn't agree to the relationship between her and His Highness. He didn't want her to come back at all. Hellion Vivian said, oh, so she was a man of sacrifice. She even had such a relationship with Belagaju. Qing Zhon was stunned. Princess, you didn't know? I know now. Hellion Vivian looked at her with a smile. Qing Zhon, thank you. Your description is very concise and comprehensive. But just now, Princess. Qing Zhon stuttered a little. She felt that she was being tricked. She thought that Princess knew everything. Otherwise, why would she suddenly mention Miss Yoon? Hellion Vivian was very innocent. I only guessed that you might know Miss Yoon because the way you looked at her didn't seem right. As for the rest, I'll just take it as a romantic story. Romantic story. That's it. Qing Zhon looked up at Hellion Vivian's face from time to time. She found that there was no change in her expression at all. Suddenly, she was confused. Could it be that Hellion Vivian liked His Highness so much that she couldn't even notice the meaning in her words? The more it was like this, the more Qing Zhon felt that she had to say it out loud. Princess, my sister is different from others. She is the person that His Highness cares about the most. Hellion Wei interrupted her. So, who do you want to follow now? Are you going to look for her, or are you staying here? Qing Zhon was stunned again. Hellion Vivian moved her fingers. When the black feathers fell, it was the sky that opened up. She held an umbrella. Occasionally, 1 or 2 drops of rain fell down and fell on the dust beside her feet. It bloomed like a silent flower. She said, if this is a battle, go find her. You can be elegant and not have a trace of blood on your hands. You can be handsome and live a glorious life. You can't follow me because if you don't stand in that position, there will be people attacking you every minute and every second. I don't have 3 heads and 6 arms, so my hands are destined to be full of blood. But, Qing Zhon, do you believe that I can give you a world that you have never seen before? Chapter 297. Qing Zhon's eyes shook. Then, she slowly raised her head, her eyes were like torches. I will follow the princess. No matter who it was, after 100 years, they would just be a pile of bones in the mortal world. Then let's go and eat first. After Hellion Wei finished speaking, she paused for a moment. After we finish eating, I'll introduce you to my little brother. You've seen too few men, that's why you like Nangong Lai's type. Qing Zhon was speechless. It was really hard to continue this topic. Hellion Vivian always treated her own people well. In the past, she was nice to her deskmate and gave them all the dishes. Now that it was Qing Zhon, she ordered more than 10 dishes and a pork rib soup like a tycoon. She held the bowl and sipped the soup, she did not eat anything else. Qing Zhon looked at the food on her small plate, then looked at Hellion Wei's thin wrist. She felt a little sour in her heart. She paused for a while and scooped half a bowl of rice for Hellion Wei. Hellion Vivian ate whatever was fed to her. She even puffed up her cheeks when eating. like a furry little hamster. It was totally different from her usual appearance. The more Qingzhon looked at her, the cuter she felt her master was. She burst out laughing. Hellion Vivian looked at her strangely and continued to stuff rice into her mouth. She was still eating. Qingzhon could not help but laugh. She picked up the bamboo chopsticks and ate. Hellion Vivian was always a woman of her words. After pushing away the rice bowl, she asked someone to call Chenifeng and the rest out. They did not arrange to meet somewhere else. After all, men and women were not allowed to be alone in the White Academy. They decided to meet at the tea house in the commercial compound where people came and went. However, the tea house was unusually crowded today. Hellion Vivian and Qingzhon just entered the tea house and saw Nangong Lai sitting opposite Yun Biluo. He rarely behaved and listened to something with his side face. Qingzhon paused and looked at Hellion Vivian subconsciously. It was strange. At that moment, the pain in her heart lessened a lot. Her only worry was that young Master Lai would tell His Highness that her sister was still alive. But what a coincidence. Before Qingzhon could speak, Yun Biluo saw them. She stood up slowly and smiled faintly. Qingzhon, why didn't you tell me that a Lai is here too? A Lai? Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. Very few people dared to call themselves the prodigy priestess. Yuan Ming naturally heard her inner thoughts. It seems that this person really has quite a high position in the third prince's heart. Otherwise, a person like Nangong Lai would not tolerate her like this. It has nothing to do with us. Hellion Vivian curled her thin lips. However, judging from her tone, it seems that she just found out that Nangong Lai is also in the academy. Yuan Xiaoming, help me think of an excuse to convince the dean. We have to pick up our pace. With the help of Nangong Lai, the prodigy priest, Yun Biluo will soon find Tusifeng. Yuan Ming smiled wickedly. I thought you weren't worried at all. Indeed, I am not in a hurry. Hellion Vivian was still smiling faintly. But I am very competitive. If I can't join the battle spirit forces, the talisman in my hand will be useless. Yuan Ming did not understand. Why do you have to join the battle spirit forces? If you are looking for the hidden army, you can totally send the mercenaries you recruited to investigate for you. You think I didn't investigate anything? Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes. I decided to join the battle spirit forces because of the investigation. I always feel that the battle spirit forces might actually be the hidden army. Yuan Ming's eyes narrowed. Your third sister's letter clearly said that the hidden army and the battle spirit forces have different battle styles. How can they be the same? Don't forget what the battle spirit forces are best at. Hellion Vivian curled her lips. They are best at disguises. The strangest thing is that the battle spirit forces and the hidden army have one thing in common. They are afraid of being found out. Why? They are doing a good deed, why would they be found out? Other than protecting their members, the only other reason I can think of is that they are afraid of trouble. I have said before that one must think from the perspective of the other party. If I were to build an army and only use it for protection, it would be a pity for the founder to build an army. Moreover, the hidden army seems to be owned by the Hellion family. But if you think about it carefully, there is no such army that requires them to approve of the other party before they can take over the army. In other words, they don't belong to anyone at all. They are choosing a successor. According to my argument now, the military talisman in my hand is the only chance for me to get closer to the truth. After I join the battle spirit forces, I will have the opportunity to really interact with them. I will complete what my mother did not complete. Even Yuan Ming, who was in the demon land, could not help but admire Hellion Vivian's intelligence after hearing this. There were very few women in this world who could achieve such a feat in reality. Qingzhon looked at Yun Biluo and did not know what to say. Fortunately, at this moment, someone at another table stood up with a smile and waved at Hellion Vivian. Boss, over here, over here. It was Chenifeng. He smiled like the sun and had a very bright personality. Hellion Vivian nodded at him. Usually, at this time, they would have a jar of Nu Hong. Today, they could only drink hot tea and not wine. This is Qingzhon. Hellion Vivian was very dignified when she ordered her underlings. This is Chenifeng, General Chen's son. This was the first time Chen Yifeng had seen a woman in his team. His father and grandfather were all generals, so he would get nervous whenever he saw a woman. Once he got nervous, he would jump out and say, "Hey, take a seat, take a seat." Qing Zhon had never seen a man like this before. That kind of warmth made people let down their guard easily. No wonder he was the princess's friend. Hellion Vivian put one hand on the back of the chair and looked at both of them with a smile. Then, she asked Chen Yifeng, "How's the martial practice that I gave you last time? Father and grandfather praised me, and..." Chen Yifeng always felt uncomfortable with a woman around. After all, she was not the boss. She was a real soft girl. The retired emperor even promoted me. Hellion Wei Wei took a sip of the hot tea and said, "That's good. Qing Zhon is younger than all of you. You've seen how thin she is. You know what to do when I'm not in the academy." "Yes, yes, yes. Don't worry, boss." Chen Yifeng was good at this. He smiled like the sun. "She is indeed too thin. I don't know what these women are thinking. They always think that they are fat. Let me take care of her in the future. I promise I will take good care of her." Chen Yifeng was an uncouth man. Usually, no man would say such things. He just had to say it out loud. On the other side, Yun Biluo saw it and laughed. What is she doing? Is she looking for a husband for Sister Qing Zhon? After that, she looked at Nangong Lai. Chapter 298. Yun Biluo thought that he would follow her lead and smile nonchalantly. She didn't expect that Nangong Lai's devilishly handsome face would look even colder than before. Yun Biluo was surprised, but before she could speak, Nangong Lai stood up. Nangong Lai stood up and smiled wickedly. "Didn't you say you wanted to play a song? Where's the song?" There was no coldness in his smiling eyes. All that was left was his usual carefreeness, so much so that Yun Biluo thought she had seen wrongly. Heizhu sat aside with a cup of tea in her hand. "Sister Yun, please play another song, so that others can see where she is lacking." As she spoke, Heizhu looked at the people at Hellion Vivian's table. Hellion Vivian pressed on her belly and lowered her head to rub it. Her eyes were indifferent, as if she had never taken anyone seriously. This was what made Heizhu angry. The saying that ugly people were more troublesome was true. "Sister." Heizhu smiled at Yun Biluo. "It seems that some people don't even look at you." "You're right. With her looks, she doesn't dare to look at you. The difference is like heaven and earth." Yun Biluo did not speak. She only curved her lips and asked Nangong Lai beside her, "Which song does Lai want to hear?" "Sister, it's too monotonous for you to sing alone." Heizhu's eyes flashed and fell on Hellion Vivian again. "I heard that sister and the Princess Consort have a bet. Why don't we compete in advance to see who is better?" Her sister had been with His Highness since she was young. She was naturally familiar with the 4 arts. However, that ugly woman could not even write properly, let alone sing. This time, she must slap this ugly woman in the face. Let her properly understand what kind of identity she had. "I think it's fine." Hellion Jiaowa, who had been silent all this while, took the lead and chuckled. "We're all here, it's fair." Hellion Vivian smiled. She had not agreed yet, but this group of people had decided on their own. What was the point of talking about fairness? Hellion Jiaowa knew better than anyone else whether she had learned the piano or not. In his memory, this body had also leaned against the window, wanting to secretly learn something. At that time, she was still young, no more than 10 years old. However, before she could attend the next class, she was cornered by the Hellion Jiaowa. They made her bark like a dog, and if she didn't, they would strip her naked. Hellion Vivian didn't scream. She was severely beaten and never came back to Shuaqin's courtyard again. She used both hands to wield a long saber, a short sword, and a submachine gun to sweep both the black and white sides. Yet, she couldn't even play a xylophone. Did someone grab hold of her weakness and want to teach her a lesson? Hellion Vivian turned the teacup in her hand and smiled. Qing Zhon also felt that this was obviously bullying. She clenched her left hand and glanced at Heizhu. "Heizhu, aren't you afraid that His Highness will get angry and take your life?" "Why would His Highness get angry?" Heizhu looked at Qing Zhon amusedly. "Sister just wants to compete with the princess. Besides, His Highness has always liked to listen to sister play music. If His Highness was here, he would be happier than anyone else. Qingzhon, why do you have such a big reaction? You don't have to attract Master Lai's attention like this. At this point, everyone could hear the sarcasm in her words. Bursts of laughter sounded from the tea house. Qingzhon's face turned pale, but she didn't have any intention to retreat. She stood in front of Hellion Vivian, but before she could speak, Hellion Vivian suddenly stood up, crossed the wooden stool, and smiled at He Zhu. She didn't hide her magic. The mole under her eyes was particularly clear when she smiled. The half-exposed white teeth at the corner of her mouth made her expression very difficult to guess. Isn't this a bet? What is the bet? Not knowing if it was because the contrast was too big, He Zhu was a little confused and said, Bet? It's okay if you don't know, but Hellion Vivian reached out to the side of the vertical guqin. Her movements were simple and neat. She plucked the strings of the guqin one by one. She then turned her head, squinted her eyes at He Zhu, and said slowly, if you don't know, then get out of my way. Don't be an eyesore. He Zhu heard this and straightened her neck. Her temper was as expected, she would explode at the slightest provocation. But before she could speak, Yunbiluo held her hand and smiled at Hellion Vivian. How about this, if I win, you give up your seat. If I lose, I will tell you all the information and clues this time. Give up my seat. Hellion Vivian repeated these two words playfully. She raised her eyes and looked at Nangong Lai. Is this your idea? Or their idea? After all, Nangong Lai could still speak on behalf of the third prince sometimes. Nangong Lai frowned and looked back at Yunbiluo. Then, he said to Hellion Vivian, this has nothing to do with me. I just want to listen to the music. Is that so? Hellion Vivian lowered her eyes as if she was thinking about something. He Zhu sneered, Sister, why are you betting with her? As long as His Highness sees you, do you still need her to give up her seat? His Highness will definitely divorce her. Hearing this, Hellion Wei curled her lips into a smile. She raised her eyes and met Yunbiluo's gaze. I'll bet with you. However, this bet is a little too small. If I lose, I can give up my position. It's just a title, you can take it if you want it. As for if I win, He Zhu's tongue will be cut off to compensate me. What do you think? Miss Yun, do you want to bet? Hearing this, He Zhu suddenly looked at Yunbiluo. Yunbiluo remained silent, as if she was weighing the pros and cons. He Zhu did not believe in evil. She said in a strange tone, Sister, since the Princess Consort has said so, then let's bet. It's a good opportunity for everyone to enjoy. After all, Sister's music is different from ordinary people's. It's rare for people to have the opportunity to listen to it. All right. As if she had made an important decision, Yunbiluo smiled at Hellion Vivian as if she was considerate of her. Miss Hellion Vivian, you probably haven't prepared anything yet. Shall I go first? Hellion Wei glanced at Yunbiluo with a cold smile on her face. Qingzhon was still worried about Hellion Vivian because she was also a death attendant. She knew better than anyone how powerful Yunbiluo was. As Yunbiluo spoke, she reached out her hand and let the servant girl pass her peeper. Her slender fingers just touched the strings of the peeper. The tinkling sound of the peeper was like the spring water flowing between the stones, gliding slowly past the ears. It was indescribably comfortable. Her voice was also very pleasant. Every frown, every smile, every note and every tune were played exquisitely. When the same song was sung by her, it was gentle and pleasing to the ears. Chapter 299. The people in the tea house were already mesmerized by the music. When the song ended, Yunbiluo stood up gently. Her figure was like a willow and her beauty won a round of applause. The more Chen Yixiong listened, the more he felt that their boss was dangerous. He glanced at Hellion Vivian worriedly. Their boss was good at assembling armaments, but when it came to singing, it was hard for him to imagine how his boss would sound like when she sang. Wouldn't it scare people away? He Zhu glanced at Hellion Vivian with a smug look on her face. She said to Yunbiluo, Sister, your guqin skills are getting better and better. I'm afraid no one will dare to play Guqin and sing in front of you in the future. Yun Biluo smiled. Heizhu, that's enough. You're praising me too much. I'm telling the truth. You can ask Master Lai if you don't believe me. Heizhu looked at Nangong Lai. He's a person who knows how to appreciate Guqin. Nangong Lai was, of course, a person who knew how to appreciate Guqin. However, the current situation made his thin lips cold. Yun Biluo was afraid that he would think too much, so she quickly pulled Heizhu back. She looked at Hellion Vivian with rippling eyes. Miss Hellion Vivian? It's your turn. Heizhu did not say anything, but she acted as if they had already won. Hellion Vivian did not look at her. She picked up the Guqin but did not play it. Instead, she flipped it with one hand so that one end of the Guqin was on the ground and the other end was upright. It was just enough for her to hold it in her hand. No way, she doesn't even know how to hold the Guqin. Just when everyone was laughing involuntarily at Hellion Wei's actions. Suddenly, a low and deep voice came out from his throat. The wind brightens the snowflakes. The wind whitens our hair. We said we would conquer the world together. Do you still remember? It was midsummer that year. Our wish was infinitely big. Hand in hand, we became a boat. Across the river of sorrow. Hellion Wei's voice had always been deeper than other women's, and now that she was on her period, her voice was slightly hoarse. It was almost from the first sentence that she spoke. It caught everyone's ears. Not to mention others, even Nangong Lai's eyes flashed with a trace of amazement. That kind of melody, that kind of singing voice, had never been heard before. At this moment, a flute suddenly sounded from upstairs. It was actually a song that was sung by Hellion Vivian. Hellion Vivian paused for a moment. She looked upstairs and her eyes met with a pair of twinkling eyes. She saw that Jing Wushuang was looking at her gently. His ivory-white clothes outlined his figure even more elegantly. He looked like a person who had walked out of an ink painting. Occasionally, when the wind blew, he would brush it away with a smile. His movements were slow and elegant. He was so handsome that it could make people in the world suffocate. The sound of Jing Wushuang's flute was not as simple as it sounded pleasing to the ears. The sound of the flute carried a gentle inner force, as steady as flowing water. It seemed to be able to soothe the restlessness and uneasiness in one's heart, and it had a warm and gentle power. Hellion Vivian smiled. Her voice became deeper and more pleasing to the ears. It was as if it had been moisturized and blended with the beautiful flute sound. She looked at the people who were listening to the song. Her eyes were shining like a singer who was telling a heartbreaking story. We agreed not to separate. We will always be together. Even if we are enemies with time. Even if we are against the whole world. Innocent time cannot be bullied. Youth is absurd, I will not let you down. Snow begs you not to erase the traces of us being together. When the song fell, the flute sound stopped. The tea house was silent. Chen Yifeng was really dumbfounded. Only when Hellion Vivian put down the zither and walked to his side did he react. He blurted out, "This song is too damn good to listen to." It was as if he had triggered a mechanism. When his words fell, the audience was in an uproar. Everyone surrounded Hellion Vivian and asked her questions. They couldn't wait for her to sing one more song. Hellion Vivian rubbed her stomach and laughed. "Hey, I'm still in the competition. Let me pass first." Oh. Only then did the students open up a path for her. However, with just this one song, Hellion Wei had already made a qualitative leap in their hearts. Even the girls from the superior compound couldn't help but think of Hellion Vivian's previous experience because of her song. Thinking about it carefully, she was the one who was betrayed. Obviously, it was Prince Murong's family who heartlessly divorced her. But in the end, the one who was scolded as a love-struck fool was her. Now, she was finally married to the third prince, but it was still not satisfactory. Because everyone knew why the third prince had married her. They were all girls. They all wanted to have someone who would never leave them. However, no one dared to say and do as Hellion Vivian did. In fact, they were the group of cowards. They didn't deserve to laugh at this ugly girl who was tougher than anyone else. Hellion Vivian didn't know what these people were thinking. The reason why she agreed to the bet was very simple. It was to avenge Qing Zhon. So, she was determined to get He Zhu's tongue. Let's vote. Let's decide by the number of people who clap. Helian Wei Wei curved her thin lips and said lazily, if you think I sang well, why don't you start clapping now? Well, those who clap will get silver. When the people heard the last sentence, they laughed first and then applauded. In the middle, there were also cheers. Third Princess Consort, you sang really well. Even without the silver, you sang well. Thank you. In the face of such praise, Helian Vivian didn't feel pretentious at all. She smiled handsomely. Your taste is really good. Calm but not cold-hearted, indifferent but humorous. These words were perfect to describe Helian Vivian. So, after the speech, there were a few more people who clapped. For the song, and also for Helian Vivian. The winner was obvious. When it was Yun Biluo's turn, there were only 7 or 8 sounds. They were the people who followed Helian Jiaowa. He Zhu's face turned pale in an instant. Helian Vivian smiled faintly. She spun a dagger in her palm. At this moment, she was like a demon, pressing every inch. Do you want to do it yourself, or do you want me to help you? He Zhu saw her coming and clenched her hands. It looked like she was going to do it. Of course, Yun Biluo wouldn't let her do it. If something happened, her whereabouts would be exposed. How could she be willing to be taken away by the retired emperor again without even seeing him? Thinking about it, she reached out and stopped He Zhu's movement. She looked at Qing Zhon. Qing Zhon, you have always been close to He Zhu. If she loses her tongue, the rest of her life. There were feelings among the death servants. It was because they had gone through too much training that those who stayed in the end were few and far between. In their hearts, other than protecting their master, they usually stayed together with the few of them. It could be said that they had gone through thick and thin together. Yun Biluo dragged Qing Zhon into this at this moment to make things difficult for her. Chapter 300. The reason was simple. At this moment, if Qing Zhon did not plead for mercy, someone would definitely say that she was ungrateful. If Qing Zhon pleaded for mercy, this matter would definitely leave a knot in Helian Vivian's heart. Some things are easier to do when the master and servant are not on good terms. Qing Zhon paused and looked at Yun Biluo in disbelief. It was as if in her heart, the person who was like a sister would not make things difficult for her with this kind of problem. However, it was obvious that she was wrong. Humans were capable of doing anything for the sake of their own interests. Perhaps it was because she stood on the side of the princess that she became the target of the other party's attack. However, Qing Zhon did not regret it. She looked up and was about to speak. However, Helian Vivian continued, Miss Yun, Qing Zhon is a soft-hearted girl, but since she is with me, she is my person. I have a principle, which is to protect my own people. You said that Qing Zhon and He Zhu have a good relationship, then I would like to ask. He Zhu has been joking about Qing Zhon's previous feelings since just now. You asked about the rest of He Zhu's life. What about the rest of my Qing Zhon's life? A woman cares about nothing more than her reputation. Did He Zhu's mouth leave any face for Qing Zhon? Or are you saying that you can't afford to lose? Yun Biluo's curved eyes froze. She slowly clenched her fists and exerted all her strength. However, her expression was still as gentle as before. Her eyes were red with grievance. Of course not. Miss Weiwei, you've misunderstood me. Then accept your loss, Helian Vivian said as she put her hand on Qing Zhon's shoulder, and, young Master Lai. Helian Vivian said the 3 words young Master Lai very lazily but with a sense of coldness. I think you must have misunderstood something before. She smiled at Nangong Lai. My Qing Zhon is too young and is easily soft-hearted. Sometimes, she can't even tell what is like and dislike. Moreover, even if she likes, she knows when to stop and let go. No matter what, to treat someone who used to take care of you so much, you just watch her be mocked like this. Master Lai, I have to say, you really think too highly of yourself. Do you really think that you can make people never get tired of eating you? Nangong Lai suddenly raised his head. He wanted to explain, but he saw that Qing Zhon's eyes were not on him since the beginning. His heart began to sink slowly. It was the first time in his life that he felt so irritated. He wanted to scold someone. Hellion Vivian curved her thin lips slightly and reached out to pinch Qing Zhon's face. "All right, you don't have to make such a difficult choice. If I want something, who else can make it difficult for me?" As soon as she finished speaking, no one saw how she moved. He only felt a cool breeze blow past. Hellion Vivian arrived in front of He Zhu. After all, He Zhu was a death warrior. Naturally, she sensed the danger. She wanted to reach out to block it, but it was too late. Hellion Vivian looked at her and smiled wickedly. First, he gave her 3 hard slaps. Pa. He had used a lot of strength in the last slap. He Zhu's entire face tilted to one side. He Zhu had never been hit by anyone like this before. There was blood on her mouth. Hellion Vivian said faintly, "These 3 slaps are for Qing Zhon." "He Zhu, do you think that everyone wants to be a concubine like you?" As if her thoughts were exposed, He Zhu's expression changed. What did you say? How much do you want to be a concubine for Belagaju? That's why you do so many disgusting things." Hellion Vivian finished this sentence and moved the dagger. When He Zhu wanted to speak again, her mouth was already full of blood. The pain made her scream in an instant. Hellion Vivian acted as if he did not hear it and retracted his hand. Unveils did not expect that He Zhu would attack without warning. Not only that, she was so ruthless. She caught He Zhu in one go. Looking at the blood gushing out of her body, she quickly stuffed a pill into her mouth. Hellion Vivian did not care about them at all. She glanced at a few students from the superior compound who gasped. Hellion Jiaowa was one of them. "How many times have I told you? I'm not the useless person I used to be. You just don't listen and keep coming to me." Chen Yifeng. "Yes. Boss, I'm here. I'm here." Chen Yifeng came over excitedly. "Who do you want to beat? Just say it." Hellion Vivian knocked on his head. "Can beating people solve the problem? We are cultured people. Don't always fight and kill." Chen Yifeng thought. Then who was the one who was fighting and killing just now? "I'll listen to boss's instructions." His old man said to follow their boss. She was a powerful woman. Hellion Vivian spoke in a calm tone. It was because it was so calm that it made people's scalps tingle. "Find out which families they are from. Organize the information and hand it to the dean. Tell him that they are suspected of bullying their classmates. Violence is not allowed in the academy." "Yes." Chen Yifeng lowered his eyes and thought to himself. His boss's skill of beating people up was getting better and better. Although those people really liked to get together and laugh at others, where did the term violence in the academy come from? After Hellion Vivian dealt with them, she did not care about the expressions of Unveils and the others, including Nangong Lai. She lifted her long legs and walked toward the 2nd floor. As she walked, she wanted to tie up her long hair. Unfortunately, when she was beating people up just now, just as she was thinking, suddenly, a pair of jade-like hands extended in front of Hellion Wei's eyes, carrying a light medicinal fragrance, holding a simple and unadorned hairpin, revealing a calmness that made people feel at ease. "Here." Hellion Vivian raised her head and saw Jing Wushuang's deep black eyes. She raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Why is it with you?" Jing Wushuang smiled but did not say anything. Her hand that was holding the hairpin reached out to her, signaling her to tie up her hair. Hellion Vivian took it and tied up her hair. She looked calm, as if the person who was angry just now was not her. There was a hint of laziness in her elegance. Jing Wushuang nodded in satisfaction when she saw that the woman had tied up her hair again. Her lips were still smiling lightly. "This suits you better. That's why I'm a gentle person." Hellion Vivian smiled handsomely. The alienation in her eyes gradually disappeared. "Thanks for just now. You played the flute very well." "That's because you sang well." Jing Wushuang smiled and coughed lightly. "This is the first time I've heard such a song. Even if I'm against time, even if I'm against the whole world, the only thing I want in life is to have a confidant." The corner of Hellion Wei's mouth slightly curved. If young Master Wushuang opens his mouth, countless female confidants will follow one after another. "Me." Jing Wushuang looked at Hellion Vivian's black eyes. The curve of her eyes was especially gentle. Forget about me. Do you want to have a cup of tea before you leave? I happen to have a martial arts practitioner here that I can't figure out. Chapter 301. Helian Wei Wei agreed and left the rest of the matters to Chen Yifeng to deal with. Qing Zhon originally wanted to be the assistant and help Chen Yifeng, but when she took a step forward, her arm was grabbed by someone. Nangong Lai didn't seem to give her any chance to break free. He pulled her over and strode out of the door. Hey, you! Chen Yifeng wanted to pull him back. Nangong Lai looked at him coldly. This is none of your business, get lost. The prodigy priest also had his temper. As the successor of the entire Dragon War Empire, when Nangong Lai tore apart his unruly nature, there was a coldness that was more domineering than anyone else. Chen Yifeng knew him. He used to be in the same team as their boss, and they were both from the inferior compound. They seemed to have a good relationship. Today, to be honest, Chen Yifeng was a little confused. Qing Zhon did not break free. She knew the young master that she had served for almost 10 years better than anyone else. She only raised her eyes slightly and said calmly, "Young Master Lai, if there's anything, just say it here. Yifeng and I still have things to do." Yifeng? Nangong Lai looked back and his tone was so cold that it was not like him. "You call me that so intimately. Why? Now that you have changed your master, the person you like has also changed, right?" Qing Zhon pulled her hand back as if she was stating a fact. "Young Master Lai, you know that I have already changed my master. I am a servant. A servant will naturally be loyal to the current master. I hope young Master Lai will not make things difficult for me." Listening to the word servant girl beside his ear, Nangong Lai only felt that it was harsh to the ears. He took a deep breath and slowed down his tone. "If I said that I came here today by coincidence, and that I didn't think that they would say those words to you, would you believe me?" "I believe you." 2 words, but the answer was too fast, which made Nangong Lai feel that something was not right. "Young Master Lai, is there anything else? If not, we will go back to work." Qing Zhon stood there with her back straight. She thought that there had never been a day when her back was so straight. If it wasn't for the Princess Consort today, she might never experience this feeling. She had really liked a person for too long, so long that she was extremely humble. That was why she had been poked in the soft spot so many times that she even forgot to hold her head high. Nangong Lai looked at the girl in front of him as she slowly walked towards another person. Then, the 2 of them compensated the tea house for the loss. The people who were watching the fun just now had become a little frightened. Yun Biluo sat on the ground with Heizhu in her arms. Her face was filled with tears. Nangong Lai was a person who rarely regretted, but today, he regretted coming to this tea house. Of course, he would not let those who mocked her off so easily. He just wanted her to know the disadvantages of not having him. But, bang! Nangong Lai seemed to be at the end of his patience. He kicked away the wooden stool beside him and walked out of the tea house. He was afraid that if he stayed any longer, he would not be able to control himself and make a move. Based on the current situation, any random person was more important than him in her heart. She was so reckless because she thought that he would not do anything to her. Obviously, she was the one who drugged him, but in the end, he was the one who was wrong. Nangong Lai thought for a while and went back. But this time, he still looked as evil as before. He leaned his body and whispered in Qing Zhon's ear, "Even if you don't care about yourself, you should think about the end of your princess consort and this Chen Yifeng beside you. If you want the Chen family to lose their position in the officialdom, you should continue to stay here." After that, he smiled and left with a flick of his sleeve. This time, Qing Zhon could only bite her lips and follow him. In a corner where no one was around, Nangong Lai did not look very happy. There was a unique coldness in his smile. "It seems that you are really good to him." Qing Zhon's eyes were half closed. "What should I do to appease your anger?" "You want me to appease my anger?" Nangong Lai's voice was faint. "Then tell Helian Vivian that you want to come back." Qing Zhon suddenly raised her head and frowned. "Go back? Didn't you not want to see me? I have changed my mind again." Nangong Lai stretched out his hand and pressed Qing Zhon against the wall. "Of course I have to keep the person who drugged me by my side and teach her a lesson. What do you think? Qingzhon knew what he meant by teaching her a lesson. Her eyes dimmed and she looked directly at the face that she had liked for so many years. Other than asking me to go back, what can you do to appease your anger? You. Nangong Lai felt a sudden pain in his chest. Then, he smiled charmingly. Qingzhon, do you really want to do something with that Chenifeng? Qingzhon's eyes were calm. Young Master Lai, you know that I have wanted to have a family since I was young. Chenifeng is a good person. He works for the Princess Consort. It is easy to be with him. But I understand what young Master Lai wants to say. I am no longer a virgin and I am not good enough for him. You mean to say that if you were a virgin, you would want to marry him? Nangong Lai's smile was even wider, but the coldness was more frightening than the evilness. Qingzhon, I have really underestimated you. After that, he turned around and disappeared completely from the noisy street, in the dormitory of the inferior compound. Bailey Jiaoju's handsome figure stood in a room that didn't belong to him. His deep eyes swept across the empty bed inside, his long eyebrows slightly wrinkled. Master, the princess consort should not be here. Fire Chaline's nose twitched, her breath is cold. It seems that she has been gone for quite a long time. Beligaju nodded faintly. His slender fingers slid across the table, bringing out a touch of coldness. Master, should we continue to wait? Fire Chaline looked at the furnishings around and thought that the princess consort was really something. It had lived for so many years, but it was the first time that it saw its master waiting for someone. One should know that its master was an extremely impatient person. Not to mention waiting for someone, he had never even sat down for someone. However, since yesterday, its master's behavior had surprised the Fire Chaline, who was a mythical beast. After a while, Beligaju walked out of the room. His long hair was blown by the night wind. His slender fingers were perfectly wrapped under the gloves. There was a hint of self-mockery at the corner of his mouth. If he did not look for her, she would not know where to throw him away. When had he, Beligaju, ever been like this? Master. Fire Chaline raised its eyebrows in confusion. Beligaju looked at the swaying bamboo forest in the distance. The breeze was blowing and even his voice was cold. Go to the commercial compound. Huh? Go to the commercial compound? Fire Chaline raised its head silently and looked at the bright moon. Its master was really not suitable for the atmosphere at the commercial compound. Every time he went, he would be surrounded. Didn't its master say that he hated going to the commercial compound the most? What happened today? You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.